The entry of the French into Alexandria in the year 1213, 1798 AD. On Sunday, the 10th of the sacred month of Muharram of this year, letters arrived, brought by messengers from the frontier of Alexandria. The content of these letters was as follows. On Thursday, 8 ships from the ships of the English appeared before the frontier, the port and coastal defences of Alexandria. The ships stood at some distance, so that the people of the city could see them. After a short time, another 15 ships arrived, making a total of 23 English ships. The people of the frontier wondered what these ships wanted. Suddenly, a small boat came from the direction of the English ships. There were 10 men in the boat. They reached the land and met with the leaders of the city and with the chief at that time. The chief was the one in charge of confirming or rejecting decisions. His name was Syed Muhammad Karim, who will be mentioned later. The city leaders and Syed Muhammad Karim spoke with the English envoys. They asked the English about their purpose. The Englishman replied, "We are English. We are searching for the French, because they have left with a great fleet, aiming for one of the regions. We do not know exactly where they want to go. Maybe they will surprise you, and if that happens, you will not be able to resist them or prevent them." Syed Muhammad Karim did not believe what the English told him. He thought it was a trick. The leaders answered the English envoys harshly with tough words. The English envoy then said, "We are staying with our ships in the sea to protect the frontier. We do not need anything from you except to buy water and provisions for their price." But the leaders did not accept this and did not give them those supplies. They replied, "This land belongs to the Sultan. Neither the French nor anyone else has a right over it. Go away from us." Then the English envoys returned to their ships, and all the ships sailed away from before Alexandria to somewhere else. So the matter of God was done as he had decreed. Then the people of the frontier town, Targa, sent a message to the naval inspector, Kashif al-Bahriya, so that he could gather the Arab tribes and come with them to defend the frontier. When this correspondence was read in Cairo, it caused a lot of confusion among the people. They talked about it among themselves, and many rumors and stories spread. On the 3rd day after the first letters arrived, other letters came. Their content was that the ships which had come to the frontier town had returned back. So the people felt reassured. The talk and rumors calmed down. As for the local rulers, Umara, they did not care about what had happened. They did not pay much attention to it, relying on their own strength. They claimed that even if all the European Franks, Ifrangi, came together, they would not be able to stand against them, and that they, the local rulers, would crush them under their horses. But on Wednesday, the 24th of the mentioned month, letters arrived from the frontier town, from Rosetta, Rashid, and from Damanhur. The news in these letters was that on Monday, the 22nd, many French ships and buildings, large warships, had arrived. They anchored in the sea and sent a group to ask for the consul and some of the people of the town. When these people went down to meet the French, they were detained and held by them. When night came, some of the ships moved to the direction of the foreigners, Al-Ajam meaning the Franks, or French forces. They disembarked onto land, bringing with them war machines and soldiers. The people of the frontier town had no idea what was happening. In the morning, they suddenly found the enemy everywhere around the town. like a swarm of locusts. At that moment, the people of the frontier town, together with the allied Arab tribes and the naval inspector who had joined them, went out to defend the town. But they found themselves unable to fight back, nor could they resist. They were not able to maintain the battle, and the naval inspector and his men from the Arab tribes were defeated. The people of the frontier town withdrew and hid behind walls and inside houses for cover. The French entered the town and spread throughout it in large numbers. Even then, the people of the town continued to defend themselves by shooting, fighting, and resisting for the sake of themselves and their families. But when they became exhausted and saw that they would inevitably be captured under any circumstance, and because they had no means to fight, the towers were empty of war tools and gunpowder, and the enemy was numerous and strong, the people of the frontier town asked for a guarantee of safety. Amen. The French granted them safety and stopped the fighting. They let them come out of their fortifications. The French announced safety within the town, raised their banners, and called for the notables of the frontier town to come before the French leader. He made them gather all their weapons and bring them to him. He also ordered them to place a jukar on their chests over their clothes. The jukar is described. It is 3 circular pieces of cloth, each one smaller than the one beneath, in the colors black, red, and white, so that all 3 colors appear as concentric circles on the chest, stitched or pinned on top of the clothing. When these reports reached Cairo, people became very disturbed. Most of them started thinking about fleeing and escaping. As for what happened among the rulers in Cairo, Ibrahim Bey went to the citadel of Al-Ain and met with Murad Bey, who was staying in Giza. The remaining rulers, scholars, and notable people gathered with them as well. They spoke together about this recent event. They agreed on a plan. Their opinion was that they should send a letter about this incident to Istanbul. They decided that Murad Bey should prepare the armies and that he should go out to meet the French and fight them. The council ended with this decision. They wrote the letter and sent it with Kurbasha and his messenger through the desert route, so he could reach faster by way of Iraq. They then began to prepare for the defense and to do everything that needed to be done in a period of 5 days. They started to seize goods from people and took most of what they needed without paying for it. After Friday prayers, Murad Bey set out with his tents and his forces and went to the Black Bridge. He stayed there for about 2 days so that all the soldiers and supply wagons could gather together. Bashir Pasha of Tripoli and Nasif Pasha were notable people with him and were staying with him in Giza. Murad Bey took with him a large amount of cannons and gunpowder. He also brought with him a group of cavalry soldiers. As for the foot soldiers, the Albanian Ardashir regiment, the Greeks, and the Maghribis, they traveled by water on the small boats which the above-mentioned emir had prepared. When Murad Bey left the Black Bridge, he sent an order to Cairo. He commanded them to make a chain from iron that was extremely thick and strong. Its length was 133 cubits, so it could be installed across the river at the Bughaz by the Magazil Tower from one side of the riverbank to the other. This was meant to stop the French boats from crossing the Nile. This was by the advice of Ali Pasha, and he also ordered a bridge to be made from boats in that place. They put up barriers and cannons on the bridge. They believed that the French could not fight them on land, and that the French would have no choice but to attack them by boat. They thought the French would stay on the boats and fight them from there. The defenders also hoped that if they held on in fighting long enough, help would come to them. But things did not go as they expected. When the French took control of Alexandria, they began to move by land along the western route without facing obstacles. While Murad Bey was on the move and preparing, fear began to spread in the markets. The people became very confused and worried. The roads became unsafe. Thieves started to appear every night at the edges of the city. People stopped traveling through the streets and markets after sunset. Because of this, the Aga, commander, and the Wali, governor, ordered that markets and cafes be opened at night. They ordered lanterns to be hung on houses and shops. They did this for two reasons. First, to remove fear from people's hearts and make people feel at ease. Second, out of fear that the enemy, the foreigners, might sneak into the city at night. On Monday, news arrived that the French had reached Damanhur and Rosetta. Most of the people of those towns left in a hurry. They went to Fouaa and the surrounding areas. Some of them asked for safety and remained in their towns. These were the wise people. When the French arrived in Alexandria, they wrote a written notice and printed it. They sent copies of this notice to the cities they were going to enter as a way to reassure the people there. This written notice arrived together with a number of captives whom they had found in Malta. They transported these captives, and some of them were brought to Bulak. This happened 1 or 2 days before the French actually arrived. With them, they carried several copies of the written notice. Among them were some Moroccans, and there were spies among these people. These spies looked just like the infidels from Malta, and they spoke many languages. The text of the written notice was as follows: "In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, there is no God but God. He has no son and no partner in his kingdom. From the French Republic, which is built on the principles of liberty and equality." This message is from the Grand Military Commander of the French armies, Bonaparte. Let all the people of Egypt know that, for a long time, the governors who controlled the Egyptian lands have oppressed and looked down on the French nation. They also wronged French traders with all kinds of harm and attack. Now the time has come for them to receive their punishment. And for long ages, these groups of Mamluks, who were brought from the lands of the Circassians and the Abkhaz, have corrupted this good and beautiful region, which has no equal on all the face of the earth. But as for the Lord of the worlds, who is able to do everything, he has decided that their state should come to an end. O Egyptians, it has been said to you that I only came here to destroy your religion. This is a pure lie, so do not believe it. It has also been said by liars that I came to take away your rights. That is not true. I only came here to save your rights from the hands of the oppressors. I am a servant of God, the exalted and most high, more than most of the Mamluks. I respect his prophet and the glorious Quran. Tell the people also that all people are equal before God. The only thing that makes people different from each other is reason, virtues, and knowledge. But when it comes to the Mamluks, there is a conflict between them and reason and virtues. So, what makes them different from others that makes them deserve to own Egypt alone? And why should they benefit from all its good things, like beautiful slaves, noble horses, and delightful houses? If the land of Egypt truly belonged to the Mamluks, let them show us the evidence written by God for them. But God, the Lord of the worlds, is kind, just, and forbearing. Now with his help, from today on, no person from the people of Egypt should lose hope in attaining high positions or achieving high ranks. The learned people, the virtuous people, and people of reason among you will manage things. With this, the situation of the whole nation will improve. Before this, Egypt contained great cities. Alexandria used to have wide harbors and many busy markets. All of that disappeared only because of the injustice and greed of the Mamluks. O sheikhs, judges, imams, commanders, and notable people of the city, tell your nation that the French are also sincere Muslims. The proof of this is that they entered the great city of Rome and destroyed the temples of the Pope there. The Pope was always urging the Christians to fight against Islam. Then the French went to the island of Malta and expelled from it the Knights of St. John. The Knights of Malta, those knights used to claim that God Almighty wanted them to fight the Muslims. Even so, the French, in every age, have always been sincere friends to the Ottoman Sultan and the enemies of his enemies. May God keep his kingdom. Despite this, the Mamluks refused to obey the Sultan. They did not carry out his orders, but instead only followed their own greed and desires. Blessed, truly blessed, are the people of Egypt who cooperate with us without delay. Their condition will become better, and their ranks will rise. Blessed also are those who stay in their houses and do not support any of the two warring groups. When you know, with full certainty, that we have the greater strength, then come to us with sincere hearts. But woe, truly woe, to those who depend on the Mamluks to fight us. After that, they will find no way to save themselves, and none of them will remain. Article 1. All villages that are located within 3 hours' distance from the routes taken by the French army must send to the French army their own representatives as proof that they have obeyed and set up the French flag. The French flag is white, blue, and red. Article 2. Every village that stands against the French army will be burned by fire. Article 3. Every village that obeys the French army must also raise the banner of the Ottoman Sultan, our beloved. May his reign last. Article 4. The sheikhs in every town must immediately register all money, houses, and properties that belong to the Mamluks, and they must work with all their power to keep even the smallest part from being lost. Article 5. The sheikhs, scholars, judges, and imams must keep to their jobs. Each of the townspeople must stay calmly in his house. Likewise, the prayer continued in the mosques as usual. The Egyptians, all of them, were supposed to thank God, the Exalted, for the end of the rule of the Mamluks. They used to say loudly, "May God preserve the honor of the Ottoman Sultan. May God preserve the honor of the French army. May God curse the Mamluks, and may he improve the condition of the Egyptian nation." This was written in the French camp in Alexandria on the 31st day of the month of Messidor, year 6 of the establishment of the French Republic. This means it was at the end of the month of Muharram in the year 1213 Hijri. This is the end of the quote. In its exact words, on Thursday, the 22nd of the month, news arrived that the French had reached the surroundings of Fuwa and then to al-Rahmaniya. The month of Safar in the year 1213, Hijri began. This was on July 15th, 1798 AD. On Sunday, the 4th of Safar, news arrived that on Friday, the 29th of Muharram, the Egyptian army had confronted the French, but the event was nothing but a disaster. Murad Bey and those with him were defeated. It was not a real battle, but more like skirmishes between the advance guards of both armies. Only a few were killed from each side. The ships belonging to Murad Bey, which had the ammunition and war equipment, were burned. With these ships, Khalil the Kurdish, the chief of the artillery, was also burned. He had fought fiercely at sea, but God's fate led to a fire catching the sails. The fire then fell from there onto the gunpowder, so everything caught fire. The whole ship burned, with everyone inside, including the fighters and their leaders, who were thrown into the air by the explosion. When Murad Bey saw this with his own eyes, he became terrified and fled, leaving behind the equipment and cannons. His soldiers followed him in defeat. The infantry boarded boats and returned to Egypt, seeking safety. News of this reached Cairo, which made people very upset and anxious. Ibrahim Bey then went to the Bulaq shore. The Pasha, the religious scholars, and the leaders of the people gathered and discussed what to do in the face of this great disaster. They agreed that they should build fortifications from Bulaq to Shubra. Ibrahim Bey, along with his chiefs and Mamluks, would oversee the fortifications at Bulaq. During Murad Bey's journey, the religious scholars used to meet daily at Al-Azhar Mosque. There, they read al-Bukhari and other supplications. The sheikhs of Sufi orders, like the Ahmadis, Rifais, Berahemas, Qadiris, Sadis, and other groups, as well as the heads of guilds, held their own gatherings at Al-Azhar. Even school children were involved, reciting the gentle name of God and other names. On Monday, Murad Bey went to the region of Imbaba, and he started building fortifications there that extended to Bashtil. Murad Bey, with his officials, commanders, and a group of his soldiers, took charge of this. He concentrated on organizing everything carefully. During that time, the organization of the defenses was done personally by Ali Pasha al-Tarabulsi, the Tripolitanian, and Nasu Pasha. They brought together the large ships and galleys that had been built in Giza. They stopped these ships on the coast of Imbaba, and they filled them with soldiers and cannons. Because of this, both the western and eastern banks of the river became filled with cannons, soldiers, fortifications, cavalry, and infantry. Despite all this preparation, the officials did not feel secure in their hearts. Ever since they had received news from Alexandria, they had begun quickly moving their valuables and belongings from the large, famous, and well-known houses into small houses that nobody knew. They continued the whole night, moving their belongings and distributing them among their friends and trusted people. Some of these belongings they sent to the villages in the countryside. They also started to prepare loads for transporting these goods, bringing animals to carry them, and gathering travel supplies and equipment. When the people of the area saw this happening, they became very afraid and terrified. The rich and those with the means began to prepare for escape. If it were not for the officials who stopped them from fleeing, scolded them, and threatened that anyone who tried to leave would be severely punished, there would not have remained anyone important in Egypt. On Tuesday, they called for a general gathering, inviting everyone to go out to the fortifications. They repeated this announcement every day. Because of these daily calls, people closed their shops and markets. Everyone went out to the area of Bulak. Each group from the different trades and crafts would collect money from each member of their group to set up tents for themselves, or they would gather in ruined places or in mosques. They would organize their needs for this situation from the money they had collected. Some people would voluntarily spend from their own money for others. Some prepared groups of Maghrebis, people from the Maghreb region, or Levantines from the Levant, with weapons, food, and other supplies like that. In this way, everyone gave what they could and did whatever was within their power and ability. People were generous in spending their money, and nobody held back or was stingy at that time. However, fate did not help them. The poor and those who belonged to guilds went out with drums, flutes, flags, and bands. They were making loud noise, shouting and crying out with various chants and prayers. Sayyid Omar Effendi, the head of the Ashraf, descendants of the Prophet, went up to the citadel. He brought down from there a large flag, called by the public the prophetic banner. He carried this banner in front of him, spreading it from the citadel to Bulak. Around and in front of him were thousands of ordinary people carrying pipes and staves. They chanted, "La ilaha illa Allah," there is no God except Allah, and shouted, "Allahu Akbar," God is great, raising their voices with cries and making all kinds of noise with their drums and flutes and other things. As for Cairo, it remained empty. The streets could not be found with people in them, except for women, children, and the weak men who could not move. These men stayed hidden, with the women in their homes. The markets were closed, and the streets were dirty because nobody was sweeping or watering them. The prices of gunpowder and lead became very high. A pound of gunpowder was sold for 60.5 currency, and a pound of lead for 90. All kinds of weapons grew expensive too. People became very few, and most of the subjects, meaning the people, left with their belongings, water skins and supplies, and the respected religious scholars sat at the angle of Ali Bek in Bulak. There they prayed and begged God for victory. Others from the people stayed, some in their houses, some in mosques or religious lodges, and some in tents. The result was that all the men who were in Cairo moved to Bulak. They stayed there from the time when Ibrahim Bek set up his army camp until the time of the defeat, except for a very small number of people. Those people were the ones who had no place or shelter, so they would return to their houses to sleep at night, then go back to Bulak in the morning. Ibrahim Bek sent a message to the neighboring Bedouin Arabs, asking them to be at the front in the areas of Shubra and Mawalaha. At the same time, Murad Bek gathered many Arabs around him from different tribes such as Bahriya, Giza, Sa'id, Kabariya, the Kiyan, the children of Atiyah, the Hanadi, and others. With each passing day, the crowds increased, the fear grew bigger, and the poor people suffered most because they lived day by day and now could not work at all. This was because everyone was gathered in one place. The roads became blocked, and people did wrong to each other because the rulers did not pay attention to them. They were too busy with what was happening to them. In the countryside, people were standing up to fight each other. Some killed others, and some stole from each other. The Arabs also attacked the borders and other regions. So, All the way from the beginning to the end of Egypt, there was killing, stealing, blocking the roads, robbery, raiding of properties, destruction of farms, and every type of corruption that cannot be described. The rulers of Egypt demanded that the foreign, European Franks, merchants, stay in certain places. They imprisoned some in the citadel and some in the houses of local rulers. Officials started to search the shops of the Franks for weapons and other things. They also searched the houses of Christian Levantines, Syrians, Copts, and Greeks, as well as churches and monasteries, looking for weapons. The ordinary people wanted nothing but to kill the Christians and Jews, but the rulers stopped them. If it hadn't been for the government's prohibition, the ordinary people would have killed the Christians and Jews during the time of unrest, fitna. Every day, rumors increased that the French were getting closer to Cairo. People disagreed about where the French would come from. Some said they were coming from the western side by land. Others said, no, they are coming from the east. Still others said, they will come from both directions. Even so, none of the top army commanders sent out a spy or patrol to gather information or fight the French before they actually entered and got close or arrived at the city gates. Instead, both Ibrahim Bek and Murad Bek simply gathered their troops and stayed in place. They did not move from their spots, but waited to see what would happen to them. There was no fortress, no castle, and no stronghold, which was a sign of bad management and of neglecting the enemy. On Friday, the 6th day of the month, the French reached the Black Bridge. On the next day, Saturday, they continued their advance until they reached Dinar. At that time, a large group gathered together. This group included soldiers, local people, peasants, and people from neighboring areas of Egypt. But the soldiers had hearts that were divided and not united. Their determination was weak. They held different opinions. Each one cared only for his own life, comfort, and well-being. They were proud of their fine clothing and personal luxuries. They were deceived by their large numbers. They showed scorn for the power of their enemy. They were confused in their actions and lost in neglect and carelessness. All these reasons led to their defeat and failure. People believed that the French would come from both directions, from the east and the west. It was even spread among the followers of Ibrahim Bey that the French would attack from both sides. However, the French only entered from the western side. At noon, a group of soldiers from the western side mounted their horses and advanced towards the direction of Bashtil, which is a village near Imbaba. There, they met the French vanguard. They attacked the French with cavalry, but the French responded by shooting at them with their rifles, firing rapidly and continuously. The two sides fought. During the battle, Ayub Bey the Dafardar and Abdullah Kashif al-Jurf were killed, along with many others from the troops of Muhammad Bey al-Alfi and his Mamluks. After that, a column of about 6,000 French soldiers advanced under the leadership of a commander named Wizi, who was appointed as the ruler of Upper Egypt after the French took control of it. As for Bonaparte, the main leader, he did not witness the battle himself. He arrived after the defeat had taken place. He was far from this area. When the French column approached the fortifications of Murad Bey, both sides began bombarding each other with cannons. The same thing happened among the naval forces, where there were many soldiers from Rhone who had come from Damietta. They went up to Imbaba and joined with the infantry fighting together in the defensive positions. When the soldiers on the eastern side of the river saw and heard the fighting, the regular soldiers, as well as the masses of the people, the common folk, and all sorts of people, started raising their voices in shouting. They screamed loudly, saying things like, "O Lord, O Gentle One," and "O Men of God," and similar phrases as if they were fighting with their shouting and noise. The sensible people among them warned them and told them to stop doing that. They said to them, "The messenger, Prophet Muhammad, his companions and the warriors used to fight with swords and spears, by striking necks, not by raising voices, shouting and barking like dogs." But the people paid no attention and did not listen or return from what they were doing. Some were reading verses, others were listening, but there was confusion and no discipline. A large group of noblemen and soldiers from the eastern bank, including Ibrahim Bey the governor, tried to cross to the western side using boats. But the number of boats was very small, and there was a crowd pushing to get onto the ferries from a single place. For this reason, they were not able to reach the other side of the river before the defeat occurred among the fighters. Now, the violent wind increased in strength, and the waves of the sea became even more turbulent. The sand rose up in clouds of dust, and the wind blew it into the faces of the Egyptians. No one could open his eyes because the dust was so thick. Also, the wind was blowing from the direction of the enemy. This was one of the greatest reasons for the defeat, as it is written about in other sources. Then, the battalion that advanced for the battle, which was under Murad Bey, became divided in a manner that was known among them in war. They came close to the fortifications, surrounding the army from behind, in front, with their drums beating. They sent continuous rifle fire and cannon shots. The wind grew even stronger, and the dust became denser. The world around them became dark because of the smoke from the gunpowder and the dust in the air. The sound of the fighting was so loud that it seemed to deafen the ears. People even imagined that the earth shook and the sky was about to fall down on them. The war and the fighting continued for about 3/4 of an hour. Then, the defeat happened to the Western Army. Many of the cavalry drowned in the sea because the enemy had surrounded them, and it was so dark that they could not see, and the rest fell as prisoners in the hands of the French. The French captured the fortifications. Murad Bey and those with him escaped to Giza. He went up to his palace and took care of some of his affairs hurriedly for about 1/4 of an hour, then mounted and went to the south. The bodies of the dead, the clothes, the goods, the weapons, and the bedding remained scattered on the ground at the shore of Imbaba under the people's feet. Among those who threw themselves into the sea was Suleiman Bey, known as Al-Agha, and his brother Ibrahim Bey. Suleiman Bey survived, but the younger Ibrahim Bey drowned. The elder Ibrahim Bey was captured. When the Western army was defeated, the French surrounded the cannons and rifles on the eastern shore and seized them. When the people on the other side, the West, saw and knew that a defeat had happened, a great cry and uproar broke out among them. Immediately, Ibrahim Bey, the Pasha, the emirs, the soldiers, and the common people mounted their animals and left, abandoning all their heavy belongings and tents as they were, not taking anything with them. As for Ibrahim Bey, the Pasha, and the emirs, they traveled towards the direction of Al-Adliya. The rest of the people, the commoners, fled in panic and disorder, heading towards the city, entering it group after group. They were all extremely afraid and anxious, expecting destruction at any moment. They cried and wailed loudly, praying to God for deliverance from the evil of this difficult day. The women raised their voices in screams and weeping from inside their houses. All of this happened before sunset. When Ibrahim Bey settled in Al-Adliya, he sent for his family, as did those emirs who were with him. They mounted the women, some on horses, some on mules, others on donkeys and camels, and some walked on foot, like female slaves and servants. Most people spent the whole night outside of Cairo, some with their families, and others escaped alone, not asking about anyone else. Everyone was too worried about themselves to care even about their own fathers or sons. On that night, most of the people of Cairo left. Some of them went to Upper Egypt. Some of them went to the east, and they were the majority. The people who stayed in Cairo did so while putting themselves in great danger. They could not move because they were obeying the rulers and expected something bad to happen. The reason most of them stayed was because they could not leave. They did not have enough money or resources to spend on taking their wives and children and providing for them as strangers in a new place. So they surrendered to fate and prayed for a good outcome. What upset the hearts of people the most was that, in the evenings of that night, a rumor spread among the people. They heard that the French had arrived at Boulak and set it on fire, and that they had done the same to Giza. The rumor said that a group of them reached Bab al-Hadid, burning, killing, and attacking women. The reason for this rumor was that some Kulanjiyar soldiers carrying guns from Murad Bey's army, who were on the galleon, large boat, at the port of Imbaba, and could not join the main group, set fire to the galleon they were in. Also, when Murad Bey left from Giza, he ordered the largest galleon, which was opposite his palace, to be dragged with him to the side of Koba. The soldiers with him tried to pull it for a while, but stopped because the mud was too thick and there was little water. That galleon contained many war machines and ammunition. Murad Bey then ordered that it be burned as well. The flames rose from the side of Giza and Boulak. The people saw this and thought, or even became certain, that the French had burned both towns. Because of this, their terror and panic increased even more. The important people of society, the Effendis of the military units, the most respected people, the leader of the descendants of the Prophet, and some of the powerful sheikhs went out. When the ordinary people saw the important people leave, their anxiety and fear grew worse. Many people decided to escape and follow them. But in reality, everyone did not know which road to take, where to go, or where to settle. So they all hurried and rushed out, leaving from every possible direction, like a flood. People sold a lame donkey or a weak mule for many times its regular price, just to have something to ride. Most of them left walking, carrying their baggage on their heads. Their wives walked, carrying babies. If someone had a riding animal, he let his wife or daughter ride it, and he followed on foot. Most of the women walked, tired and exhausted, carrying their children on their shoulders. They were crying in the darkness of the night. They continued like this all through Sunday night and its morning. Every person took whatever money or goods he could carry. When they left the city gates and reached the open country, they were met by the Bedouin Arabs and the farmers, Those people took their goods, their clothes, and everything they were carrying. They left nothing for any person they met, except what covered his body or could stop his hunger. So, what the Bedouin took that night was far more than what was left in Cairo, without doubt. This is because most of the money belonged to the rulers, the important people, and their wives, and they took it all with them. Also, most rich people, and people with means, took what they had. The people who were too weak or poor to leave gave anything valuable that was dear to them, like money or jewelry, to others. The same happened to the trusts and deposits of the pilgrims from the Maghreb, North Africa, and the travelers. All of it was lost. It may be that some people were killed if the attackers were able to overpower them, or they defended themselves and their belongings. The attackers even stole the clothes of the women, exposed them, and disgraced them. Among these women there were women of noble status and notables, elites. Some of the people managed to return from a short distance. These were the ones who had delayed their exit. They heard what had happened to the people who left before them. Some others took a risk. They relied on the size and strength of their group and their guards. Some of those succeeded in escaping safely, while others suffered harm. That night and its morning were extremely horrible. Events happened that were unprecedented in Egypt. Nothing like them had ever occurred before, and we have never heard of anything similar in earlier histories. So seeing for oneself is not like hearing about it. When the day broke on that mentioned Sunday, the people who remained in the city did not know what would happen to them. They were expecting the arrival of the French, as well as expecting disaster to happen. Many of those who had fled returned, finding themselves in a state of chaos and fear even worse than before. It soon became clear that the French had not yet crossed to the eastern bank of the Nile. The fire that had been mentioned earlier was only among the ships. So some of the scholars and sheikhs met together at Al-Azhar Mosque to consult with each other. They agreed that they should send a letter to the French and wait for their reply before taking any action. So they did that. They sent the letter with a man from the Maghreb, North Africa, who knew the French's language. Another man also went with him for company. They were away for a while, then came back. The messenger said that they met with the leaders of the French and handed them the letter. Their interpreter read the letter to the French leaders. The letter's content was to ask about the French's intention and their plans. The interpreter then responded in the name of the French. "Where are your notables and your sheikhs? Why have they delayed in coming to us so that we can arrange for them what will comfort them and reassure them?" He treated them kindly and smiled at them. The scholars and notables replied, "We want safety and protection from you." The French said, "We have already sent you," meaning the book or letter that the French had sent before. The scholars replied, "We also ask again for the reassurance of the people." So the French wrote them another paper. The content of this was, "From the camp of Giza, a letter to the people of Egypt. We sent you previously a book that was sufficient, and in it we explained that we came for no other purpose than to remove the Mamluks, who used the French with humiliation and contempt, and who took merchants' wealth and the property of the Sultan. When we crossed to the western bank, the Mamluks came out to meet us. We dealt with them as they deserved. We killed some of them, we captured some, and have them with us now, and some of them ran away. We are still searching for them until none remain in the land of Egypt. As for the sheikhs, the scholars, those with official positions, and the common people, they should be reassured. They can stay in their homes and their shops in comfort and safety, as we have mentioned above. Then the French added, "It is necessary for the sheikhs and community leaders to come to us so that we can arrange for them a council, which will be chosen by us from among 7 wise men to look after the affairs." When this reply came back, the people became calm and reassured. After that, Sheikh Mustafa al-Sawi, Sheikh Suleiman al-Fayoumi, and others rode to Giza. They went to meet the French. The French leader greeted them, laughed with them, and said, "Are you the great sheikhs?" They told him that the great sheikhs, religious leaders, were afraid and had fled. He said, "Why should they flee? Write to them to come." He also said, "We will create a council for your comfort and for the comfort of the people, and we will put the Islamic law, Sharia, into action." So they wrote several letters from him, inviting the sheikhs to come and promising them safety. The sheikhs then left their camp after the evening prayer, Isha. They headed towards Cairo. When the people heard that the sheikhs had returned, they felt calm. Before that, the people were anxious and scared about their absence. The sheikhs spent the night. They, the French, sent a message of safety to the sheikhs. So, Sheikh al-Sadat, Sheikh al-Sharqawi, and the other sheikhs returned, along with those who had joined them. These were people who had fled from the Matariya area. As for Amr Effendi, the head of the Ashraf, descendants of the Prophet, he was not reassured and did not return. The same was true for al-Roznamaji and the other Effendis, nobles or officials. On that same day, a group called the Jaidiyah and some rabble from among the people gathered. They looted the houses of Ibrahim Bey and Murad Bey, who lived in the district of Kusun, and they burned those houses. They also looted many other houses belonging to the emirs, princes, or officials, taking everything inside, such as bedding, copper items, furniture, and other things. They sold them for the lowest prices. On Tuesday, the French army advanced towards Boulak. General Bonaparte stayed in the house of Muhammad Bey al-Alfi in Azbakiya in the Sakit district. This area had been built by the mentioned emir the previous year. It was decorated and spent on greatly with grand furniture and luxurious rugs. Just when Bonaparte settled and stayed in that house, this incident happened, the looting and burning of houses. The French emptied the house and left it as it was. It was as if the place had been built just for the French general. This is also what happened in the house of Hassan Kashif Jergis in the Nasriya district. The rest of the great emirs stayed on the other side of the Nile, away from the city. Only a few of them entered the city. The French soldiers walked in the markets without weapons and without caution. Instead, they laughed and joked with people. They bought whatever they needed at higher prices. For example, a Frenchman would take a chicken and pay its owner a French real currency, or he would take an egg for half a silver coin. He valued everything based on the prices and currency in his own country. When ordinary people saw this from the French, they became less afraid and felt safe with them. They went out to meet the French with cakes, mushrooms, bread, eggs, chicken, and different foods. They also brought sugar, soap, tobacco, and coffee. People started selling these things to the French for any price they wanted, and most of the shopkeepers and cafe owners opened their shops and cafes. On Thursday, the 13th of Safar, an Islamic month, they, the French, sent for the sheikhs and the notable leaders to meet at the camp of the military leader, Sari Askar, meaning chief of the army. When the sheikhs and leaders arrived, they were invited to sit, and the French consulted with them. They asked them to choose 10 men from among the sheikhs to form a council, divan, and to help manage government matters. The agreement was made on the following people: Sheikh Abdullah al-Sharqawi, Sheikh Khalil al-Bakri, Sheikh Mustafa al-Sawi, Sheikh Sulaiman al-Fayoumi, and Sheikh Muhammad. The text here ends, but the list is meant to be continued. There was the Mahdi, and Sheikh Muhammad al-Sirjani, and Sheikh Mustafa al-Damanhuri, and Sheikh Ahmad al-Arini, and Sheikh Yusuf al-Shurkiti, and Sheikh Muhammad al-Dawakhani. In that council also were Mustafa Kathuda Bikr Basha and the Qadi, the judge. They appointed Muhammad Agha al-Muslimani as the chief of the guards, Agat Mustafizan, and Ali Agha al-Sharawi as the governor of the police, Wali al-Shurta, and Hassan Agha Muharram as the supervisor of the market, Amin al-Ihtisab. All of this was done by the order of the leaders of the Diwan, the council. These leaders of the Diwan did not want to give high positions to people from the Mamluk class. They saw that the common people of Egypt were not afraid except of the Turks, and that only Turks could rule them. Those mentioned above, Mustafa Kithuda Bikr Basha, the Qadi, Muhammad Agha al-Muslimani, Ali Agha al-Sharawi, and Hassan Agha Muharram, were from old, noble families. They were not known for oppression and injustice like others. They also appointed Zulfikar Kethuda Muhammad Bek as the chief of Bonaparte's Kethudas officers. And among the councillors there were Khawaja Muanis and the French agents, and Hana Beinawi, the Diwan's representative. The council members gathered at the house of their president. He mentioned to them what had happened, how the houses were being looted. He said, "This is the work of the Juwaidiyya, a rough group, and the rabble of the people." He asked, "Why are they doing this, when we have ordered you to protect the houses and to seal the possessions of the Mamluks?" They replied, "This is something we have no power to stop. Only the rulers can prevent this." Therefore, they ordered the Agha, officer, and the governor to proclaim security in the city, to open the shops and the markets, and to forbid looting. But the lawless people did not listen and did not obey. The majority of the shops remained closed. The markets stayed silent and neglected. People did not feel safe. Their hearts were shaking with fear, and their spirits were heavy. A group of French soldiers then started to open the houses that belonged to the emirs. They opened the closed houses, went inside, and took things from them. When they left the doors open. When the French soldiers left a house, the Juwaidiyya would enter and take whatever they found. This went on for several days. After that, the French soldiers followed the houses of the emirs, and their followers put seals on some, lived in others. Anyone who was afraid for their home, either from the government troops, Wajakaliya, or from the people of the city, would try to protect their house by tying a flag at the door or by getting a paper from the French, written in their handwriting, whose meaning they could not understand, and sticking it on their door. In the same events, they made Bartolomei al-Nasrani al-Rumi, a Greek Christian named Bartholomew, who the common people called Fat al-Rahman, the chief of the guards, Mustafizan. He rode in a parade from the house called Sari Askar. In front of him marched several groups of soldiers and footmen. On his head was a colored silk cap. He wore a fur-lined coat, as was his custom. His servants walked ahead, holding spears with silver tips. Bayuk Basha arranged the parade for him, and they gave him an office in one of the city areas, where he and his assistants would sit. This Bartholomew lived in the house of Yahya Kashif al-Kabir in the Abdin quarter, and he took everything inside: furniture, belongings, servants, and more. Bartholomew came from the lowest class of Greek Christians who lived in Egypt as military men. He used to serve as a gunner, Tubjiya, under Muhammad Bek al-Alfi. He also had a shop on the street of Al-Mosque, where he sold glass bottles in days when he was unemployed. They also appointed a European Frankish person and made him the official in charge of the two seas. They made another person the Aga, leader of the postal service. They decided that the Diwan, the French administrative council, should be in a house that belonged to the Aga of the Azbakiya, near Al-Ruwai. The head of the Diwan lived in that house. Rotoi, who was the French Qa'im Maqam, deputy governor of Egypt, lived in the house of Ibrahim Bey al-Wali, which looked out onto Birkat al-Fil, Elephant Pond. The Sheikh al-Balad, chief of the city, a prestigious local position, lived in the house of Ibrahim Bey al-Kabir, the Great. Majlon stayed in the house of Murad Bey, which was on the wooden pier, Rasif al-Kashab. Buslik, who managed borders, lived in the old house of Sheikh al-Bakri. There, the Christian Copts gathered every day. They, the French, asked for the registers from the scribes. After that, there, the French soldiers started to enter the city group by group until the streets became full of them. They stayed in houses. However, they did not annoy anyone. They bought goods, but always paid more than their usual price. Because of this, the prices for ordinary people became very high. Bread became smaller, and some was mixed with dust. The local people opened shops next to their homes to sell different kinds of food. These included fresh bread, cakes, salted fish, meats, roasted chickens, and other foods. The Greek Christians also opened shops to sell all types of drinks, alcoholic beverages, and coffees. Some of the local Europeans opened houses to prepare food and drink in their own European way. They would buy mutton, chickens, vegetables, fish, honey, sugar, and everything they needed. Cooks would then prepare all sorts of dishes and sweets. At the doors of these houses, they would put a special sign, known among themselves. If a group wanted to eat in that place, they would enter. Inside, there were many separate rooms, some lower and some higher. Each room had its own sign and a price in dirhams that an entering person must pay. They would enter whichever sitting room they wanted. In the middle was a wooden bench or platform called a kwan, on which the food was placed. Around it were chairs where people sat. Porters would bring food in their usual way. The visitors would eat and drink as much as they wanted, not exceeding their limit. After finishing, they paid exactly the right price, not less and not more. Then they left freely. In this period, the Diwan's officials interceded, spoke on behalf of the captive Mamluks. Their mediation was accepted, and the captives were released. Many of them entered Al-Azhar Mosque, but they were in a very bad situation, wearing torn blue clothes. They stayed at the mosque, eating from the charity of the poor people living nearby. They did small tasks for passing people. This situation was a lesson for those who think and reflect. On Saturday, there was a meeting at the Diwan. They requested a loan of 500,000 riyals from the merchants. These included Muslim merchants, Coptic Christian merchants, Syrian merchants, al-Shawam, and also European Frankish merchants. The merchants asked for the amount to be reduced, but their request was refused. The French began to collect the full amount. They also made a public announcement. Whoever took anything from the looting of houses should bring it to the Qa'imakam's house. If they did not, and it was found later, the person would be punished more severely. They also announced to the wives of the local notables and rulers, assuring them of safety and protection, and that they stayed in their houses, and if any of them had some possessions left by their husbands, they would display them. If they did not have anything from their husband's property, they would negotiate for themselves and feel safe in their homes. At this time, Lady Nafisa, the wife of Murad Bey, appeared. She negotiated on behalf of herself and her followers, who were among the women of the emirs and the kashifs, local governors, and agreed to pay a certain amount of money. The agreed sum was 120,000 French rials. She started to collect that amount from herself and from others as well. They, the French authorities, demanded payment from her, as well as from the rest of the women, through intermediaries who were involved in this matter, such as the Nasara, Christians from Al-Sham, the Levant, the local Franj, Europeans, and others. These intermediaries made threats and intimidations against these women, and the same thing happened for negotiations concerning the Ghuz, Mamluks, the hidden soldiers, the missing ones, and those who had fled. Through these actions, they collected a large amount of money. They also sent letters to those who were absent, promising safety after the settlement, and the officials of the Divan, government bureau, would stamp these letters. On Sunday, they, the French authorities, demanded horses, camels, and weapons, and they took a large amount of these things. They also demanded cattle and bulls, and they reached settlements regarding these as well. They spread rumors that searches would be made, and they broke open many shops in the arms market and elsewhere. They took any weapons they found in them. Every day, they transported on camels and donkeys a large amount of goods, bedding, boxes, chests, and other valuable things, and they would extract hidden items and deposits. They started to ask for the builders, engineers, and servants who knew the houses of their masters. Sometimes, these people would go themselves and show them the locations of hidden items and places where treasures were buried, in hopes that this would get them closer to power, respect, or personal benefit. During these events, they arrested the Sheikh of the Jadiyah, a Sufi order, and another man, and they shot at them with bullets at the Azbakiya pond. Then they shot others as well in Al-Rumayla. The looters disclosed many of the belongings they had looted when fear entered their hearts, and some of them pointed out others involved. On Tuesday, they summoned the craftsmen from among the merchants in the markets, and they imposed on them the payment of a sum of silver as a loan, an amount that was too large for them, and set a deadline for it of 60 days. The people panicked and pleaded for help. They went to the Al-Azhar Mosque and to the Husseini shrines, and they asked the sheikhs there to intercede on their behalf. The sheikhs spoke to the authorities for them, and this lightened the demand to half of the original sum, and they also extended the deadline by a few days. During this episode, there were also rumors about people breaking open the doors of alleys and the main gates that opened into them. Groups of French soldiers went out and removed or destroyed the doors of alleyways, side streets, and quarters. This continued for several days. People entered into a state of severe fear because of this, and they began to have suspicions and corrupt thoughts which took form in the words they uttered. They imagined these things to be true and repeated them among each other, such as their saying, "The French soldiers are planning to kill the Muslims during Friday prayers," and others said different things. This occurred after people had started to feel some reassurance and had reopened some of the shops. But when these two rumors spread, the people drew back again, and their hearts were filled with fear. Around the 20th of the month, letters arrived from the pilgrims in Aqaba. Because of this, the officials of the Diwan, government office, went to the head of the army and informed him of the situation. They asked him to give them a guarantee of safety for the leader of the pilgrims. However, the head of the army refused. He said, "I will not grant this guarantee, except on the condition that he comes with only a small group and does not bring many Mamluks or soldiers with him." They said to him, "But who will bring the pilgrims?" He replied, "I will send them 4,000 soldiers, and they will escort the pilgrims to Cairo." So they wrote a polite letter to the leader of the pilgrims, saying he should come with the pilgrims to the Red House, and that after that the others could rejoin. But before they received any reply, Ibrahim Bek wrote to them, asking, meaning the pilgrims, to come to the area of Bilbais. The pilgrims then went towards Bilbais and stayed there for several days. Ibrahim Bek and those with him then moved from Bilbais to Mansoura, and they sent the women to Al-Qurain. On the 23rd of the month, a group of French soldiers went towards the district of Al-Adliya. Every day after that, another group would go, heading to the eastern region. On Tuesday night, their main leader Bonaparte himself came out. The vanguard of the French reached the areas of Al-Kanka and Abi Zabal. They demanded supplies from the people of Abi Zabal, but the people refused. So the French fought them, forced them to flee, defeated them, plundered the town, set it on fire, and then moved on towards Bilbais. As for the pilgrims, they camped at Bilbais. They relied on the help of the local peasants, Fellahin, and Bedouins, and these villagers and Bedouins guided them to their home regions in the Gharbia, Menufia, and Kalyubia provinces and other places. Many of the pilgrims did the same and scattered across the country with their families. Some remained in Bilbais. As for the leader of the pilgrims, Salih Bek, he went to join Ibrahim Bek and was accompanied by a group of merchants and others. On the 28th, the French took control of the city of Bilbais without any fighting. Some pilgrims were still there. The French did not harm them. They sent them on to Cairo, accompanied by a French military detachment and a drummer. On Saturday night, news arrived to the Egyptian commanders at Mansoura, informing them that the French had arrived and were nearby. The commanders immediately left in the middle of the night and went in haste to the district of Al-Qurain, leaving behind the merchants, and those with heavy baggage. At daybreak, a group of Bedouins came to these people. They made an agreement with them. They promised to take them to Al-Qurayn, swore oaths to them, and vowed not to betray them. But when they were in the middle of the road, the Bedouins broke their promise and betrayed them. They robbed their belongings, divided their goods among themselves, and stripped them of their clothes. Among the robbed was the chief merchant, Sayyid Ahmad al-Mahrouki. He alone lost about 300,000 French rials worth of cash and a large shop of all kinds of Hijazi Meccan goods. The Bedouins did all of this to them and more. The French army caught up with them. Then Sayyid Ahmad al-Mahrouki went to the area where the army was, and he faced them. He was accompanied by a group of Arabs who were hypocrites. He complained to the army leaders about what had happened to him and his brothers. He blamed them for their traveling about from place to place and for their turning towards the Mamluks and the Arabs. After that, they arrested Abu Kashaba, the sheikh chief of the village of Al-Qurayn. They said to him, "Tell us where the looted goods are." He said, "Send a group with me to Al-Qurayn." So they sent a group with him. He showed them some of the bundles, stolen goods. The French took these bundles and carried them away. Then they followed him to another place. He gave them the impression that he would enter and bring out more bundles for them in the same way. But he entered the place, then left through another exit and escaped. As a result, those soldiers returned with just 1.5 loads, which was not much. They said, "This is what we found, and the man escaped from our hands." The commander of the army said, "We must recover the lost things." So they asked him for permission to go to Cairo. He sent some of his soldiers with them, and they escorted them to Cairo. They were preceded by a drum, and they were in the worst condition. Some women who had gone out on the night of the incident were also with them. They, too, were in a terrible state and wept when they saw the sad scenes. The month of Rabi al-Awwal began on Monday in the year 1213 AH, 31st of August 1798 AD. On the second day, the French reached the area around Al-Qurayn. Ibrahim Bey and those with him reached Al-Salihiyah. They left their money and their women there for safety. They entrusted their valuables and families to the Bedouin Arabs and a few soldiers. But some of the Arabs informed the French about where the convoy was. So the army commander mounted his horse and took the cavalry with him. He set out with the intention to attack the convoy. Ibrahim Bey also learned about this. He rode out along with Salih Bey and a number of emirs and Mamluks. They fought the French for an hour. During this time, the French were close to defeat because the Mamluks were on horseback. At that moment, Ibrahim Bey was informed that the Arabs had turned on the convoy and intended to loot it. Upon hearing this, he, along with those with him, fled immediately and pursued the Arabs. They left the fight with the French. They chased the Arabs away from their possessions, killed several of them, then set off to Katia. The commander of the French army returned to Cairo and left some of his soldiers spread throughout the land. He entered Cairo by night. That was the night of Thursday, the 4th. On Friday, the 5th day, corresponding to the 13th of Mesra in the Coptic calendar, the Blessed Nile flood took place. The army commander ordered celebration preparations and the decoration of the Aqaba, the main street or slope, as was the custom. They also decorated some boats and large vessels. The people were publicly invited to go out and enjoy the Nile, the water gauge, Nilometer, and Al-Rauda, as was customary. The army commander also sent official invitations to the Kethuda, the deputy, the pasha, the qadi, judge, the heads of the divan, the notables, the councillors, and those who held official positions, urging them all to be there in the morning. He himself participated with them, riding in his procession with his soldiers, drums and banners, to the Kantara al-Sad, the dam bridge. They broke the bridge for their passage. They fired artillery salutes and set off oil lamps, torches. The story goes that water flowed into the canal, and he and his companions rowed boats until he returned to his home. As for the local people of the city, none of them went out that night for a stroll in the boats as they usually did, except for the Levantine Christians, the Copts, the Greeks, the local European Franks, and their women. Only a few idle people from the population went out to do so that morning. At that time, reports came one after another that several British ships had arrived at the port of Alexandria and that they had fought with the French ships anchored at the harbour. These reports had been spread before, and people talked about them. This news troubled the French. It happened that one of the Levantine Christians told people about this after hearing it from a notable merchant named Sayyid Ahmad al-Rahman, who was one of the leading businessmen at the soap agency. When they heard that he had talked about these things, they ordered him to be brought to them and told him about what had been said. Ahmad replied, "I only repeated what I heard from that Christian man." So they summoned that Christian man as well. They, the authorities, ordered either to cut out both of their tongues or, as an alternative, that each of them should pay 100 French rials as a punishment and a warning, so that they would stop talking about matters that do not concern them. Some of the religious scholars tried to intercede for them, but the authorities did not agree. Some people said, "Set them free, and we will bring you the money," but still the authorities refused. Then Sheikh Mustafa al-Sawi sent 100 rials and paid them on behalf of the accused. When the agent, the official, took the money, he later returned it to Sheikh Mustafa and said, "Distribute this among the poor instead." Sheikh Mustafa acted as the agent instructed and gave the money back to him, the accused. After that, people stopped talking about this matter. In reality, the British advanced after that towards the port and fought with the French ships. The British inflicted damage on the French and burned their great warship, which was called the Half the World. All the French money and supplies were on that ship. It was also covered with yellow copper as armour. The British continued to patrol the harbour of Alexandria with their ships, going back and forth and keeping watch over the French. On that very day, some of the French soldiers travelled by sea and to Sharqiya, the eastern district. After the water flowed into the canal, they, the French, prevented water from entering the Azbakaya Lake and blocked the Dikka Bridge with their cannons, guns, and war machines, which they placed there. On that day, some of the French soldiers asked about the Mawlid al-Nabawi celebration, the Prophet Muhammad's birthday, and why it was not being held as usual. Sheikh al-Bakri responded that it was because of the disruption and the difficult circumstances. The French officer did not accept this excuse and said it must be held. He then gave him 300 French rials as financial assistance, and he ordered the hanging of decorations, ropes, and lanterns. On the day of the Mawlid, the French gathered and played games in their squares. They beat their drums and played their bagpipes and sent the large drum group to the house of Sheikh al-Bakri. They continued to play those drums all day and all night by the lake under his house. These were big drums, similar to the Turkish Nubian drums, and there were many musical instruments and different flutes with pleasing sounds. At night, they set off various oil fires and rockets that rose into the sky. On that same day, Sheikh Khalil al-Bakri wore a fur robe and put on the ceremonial sash of the Sharifs, the noble descendants of the Prophet. A citywide proclamation was made that anyone with a complaint or legal case against any Sharif should bring it to the office of the chief of the Sharifs. And in the 15th of Shaban, Islamic calendar month, a large group from the French army went up towards Upper Egypt. Their leader was Desai. With them was Yaqub, the Copt, so he could inform them about the local affairs and tell them about hidden places. It is mentioned here the story of the messenger whom the French leader had sent with letters and a gift to Ahmad Pasha al-Jazar, who was in Acre. This happened when the French had settled in Egypt. The messenger was accompanied by a number of Christian Levantines. They pretended to be traders and brought with them sacks of rice. They arrived at the port of Damietta on a ship belonging to Ahmad Pasha. When they reached Acre, and Ahmad Pasha learned about them, he ordered that the Frenchmen be apprehended and taken to some towers as a type of prison. He did not meet with him or take anything from him. He ordered him to go back the way he had come. He detained the Christian Levantines who were with him. Also in this section, a group from the French army went to the house of Ridwan, the Kashif, a local governor, at the Bab el-Sharia gate. With them came an interpreter and an engineer. Ridwan's wife became very upset. A few days before, she had made a settlement for herself and her house and paid a ransom of 1,300 rials. She took a document from them and posted it on her door. She returned the rest of her valuables and belongings to friends and felt secure. But when the mentioned group got to her, they said to her, "The chief of the army heard there were weapons and uniforms for soldiers in your house." She denied this. They said, "It must be searched." She said, "Go ahead." They went upstairs and opened a hiding place, where they found 24 shawls, pieces of cloth, personal belongings, and other things. They found lower down yet another hiding place, inside which were many weapons, rifles, pistols, boxes of gunpowder, and other items. They took all of this. Then they went under the stairs, broke open the ground, and brought out many coins and an amulet of gold. Inside the amulet were gold dinars, coins. Then they made the lady of the house come down, along with a white female servant. They took them both, and also took the black female servants. They left with all of them. They held them for 3 days. They looted whatever furniture and goods they found in the house. After that, they imposed on her a fine of 4,000 more rials, which she paid. Then they set her free, and she returned to her home. Because of this incident, they became stricter in searching for weapons. They announced this, and, for the next 3 days, they continued to search houses. People said, "This is a trick to plunder houses." After a while, these searches stopped. The reason for this was that there was a rivalry between her and her Coptic neighbor. He went and reported her and told the army about her. On the 20th of the month, they appointed Mustafa Bey Ketkuda al-Basha as the leader of the Hajj caravan. He was taken to the courthouse to the judge. He wore the ceremonial robe in the presence of the elders of the council. He took an oath that he would take care to make the pilgrimage tasks easy. He made a new mahmal, a ceremonial covering for the Kaaba sent with the Hajj caravan. At that time, the people who had shares of the tax collection, iltizam, were asked about how they would manage their shares. They requested a gratuity or gift from them, but those in charge did not accept this request. Instead, they postponed the discussion until the process of writing and registration was finished. They said, everyone who has an iltizam, tax farming contract, or payment plan must appoint a spokesperson. He will write and dictate the details. They did this over several days. At this time, they calculated a financial tax or obligation on the villages and towns. They spread papers with this information, stating that it would be calculated from the collected money. They also recorded the details of this in the SIFR registers of the Copts. Then, the French went into the towns like rulers. They would imprison some people, discipline others, and enforce these orders strictly. In this period, the leader of the French army, Bonaparte, called for the presence of the sheikhs, religious leaders. When the sheikhs arrived, Bonaparte stood up from his council and returned with some colored sashes in his hand. These sashes were woven with 3 colors: white, red, and dark blue. Each sash had 3 stripes, 1 white, 1 red, and 1 blue. He placed one of these sashes on the shoulder of Sheikh al-Sharqawi. However, the sheikh threw it to the ground, apologized, and his facial expression and color changed. He reacted with displeasure. The interpreter said to the sheikhs, "You are chosen and beloved by the leader of the army. He wants to honor you and show you respect by giving you a part of his uniform and its sign, so that you are distinguished in front of the soldiers and the people. This gives you a place of honor in their hearts." But the sheikhs replied, "However, our religious standing might be lost in the eyes of God and of our fellow Muslims if we accept this." When Bonaparte heard this, he became angry and started speaking in his own language. Some of the translators conveyed his words, saying that Bonaparte stated about Sheikh al-Sharqawi, "He is not fit for leadership," and said things of this kind. The rest of the group tried to be gentle with Bonaparte and excused al-Sharqawi. Then Bonaparte said, "If that is the case, those who do not wish to wear the sash must instead put the jukar on their chests." The jukar is the sign known as the flower. It is an insignia that symbolizes obedience and loyalty. The sheikhs replied, "Give us some time so we can consider this matter." They agreed to meet again after 12 days. During this time, Sheikh al-Sadat was sent for by Bonaparte. When al-Sadat arrived, Bonaparte was sitting and smiling and greeted him gently. The interpreter expressed Bonaparte's kind words. Bonaparte then gave al-Sadat an iron ring as a present and asked him to come again the following day. He also gave him a jukar, the mark of the flower, and attached it to his robe. Al-Sadat stayed silent and went along with it. He stood up and left. But after he left Bonaparte, he removed the mark. On that same day, the group called Al-Kalakat, a group among the people, announced to everyone that they should wear the stated insignia known as the flower. This was a sign of obedience and love to the French. Most people refused to wear it. However, some people thought that wearing it would not actually contradict religious beliefs because it was only disliked, not strictly forbidden. But some also believed that refusing to wear it might cause trouble for those who opposed it. Later, on that same day, they announced the cancellation of this mark, the flower, for the general public. However, some of the notables and those who needed to enter the presence of the French leaders for specific reasons were obliged to wear it on those occasions. So when someone entered their presence, they would wear the insignia. When they left, they would remove it. This lasted only a few days, after which events happened, which will be mentioned later. Towards the end of this period, the sun moved into Libra, which is the autumnal equinox. During this time, the French celebrated their festival at the Azbakiya Gardens. On this day, the citizens began to participate in the celebrations in their country. They made that day into a festival and a memorable date. They brought wooden planks and dug holes. They set up, in the middle of the Azbakiya pond, a huge and tall pole, building it up with wood and bricks. They piled a large amount of soil all around it, making a high embankment about the height of a man. On top of that, they made a wooden mold. This mold was pointed at the top and had 4 square corners, resembling an obelisk. Around this mold, they wrapped thick fabric that they dyed a deep, dark red. At the bottom, they built a decorated base. On this base, they carved black pictures on a white background. In front of the pond's gateways, they set up something similar to a large, tall gate made out of wooden lattice. They covered this gate with cloth, painted in the same color as the central pole. Over the top of this structure, they painted a white stripe. On this white stripe, they drew black pictures. These pictures showed a scene from a battle. The Egyptian Mamluks in battle with their enemies. In these images, the Mamluks appeared to be defeated. Some were fallen on each other, and others were turning around, fleeing to the back. On the other side, by the canal bridge, where water entered the pond, they built another imitation gate with a different design. This was made for burning gunpowder. They set up even more wooden planks, standing upright and lined up from the main gate to the other gate, forming a wide circle-like shape. This structure surrounded most of the open space of the pond, so that the tall pole mentioned above stood exactly in the middle. They tied ropes between those planks, and on those ropes they hung rows of lanterns. Among these decorations, they also placed models for burning gunpowder. They spent several days working on this entire event. Events of Rabt al-Than, 1213 AH, August/September 1798 CE. The month of Rabt al-Than began on a Wednesday in the year 1213 AH. On that day, news arrived that Murad Bey and those with him, after hearing exaggerated reports that the French were arriving against them, returned to the direction of Fayoum. It was said that Uthman Bey the Ashkar, the Blonde, headed to the eastern lands and went behind the mountain to join his teacher Ibrahim Bey at Gazar. A group of French soldiers also went eastward. With them were several camels loaded with goods. The local Ghuz, tribal fighters, and Arabs who accompanied them came out against them. They managed to take several camels with their loads from the French, but did not catch up with the French themselves. Events of the 3rd of Rabi' al-Than. On the 3rd day of Rabi' al-Than, a letter arrived from Ibrahim Bey. It was addressed to the sheikhs and other notables. The meaning of the letter was, "You should remain calm and take care of yourselves and the people under your care. Our master, the Sultan, has sent us soldiers, and by God's will, we will be with you soon." When this letter arrived, Bonaparte had inquired about it. So they sent it to him, and he read it. He said, "The Mamluks are liars." It also happened at the same time that there was a chief military officer by the name of Aga Romi, who was previously staying in Alexandria. He walked through the street and went to visit the Hussein shrine. When people saw him, they found his appearance strange, and they were happy to see him. They said, "This is a messenger from the Sultan, bringing a reply for the French, ordering them to leave Egypt." Their stories and news about him differed. Some said one thing, and others said something else. People gathered at the Hussein shrine, and some of them started to follow the others. It happened at that time that news reached the people, as commonly passed by word of mouth, that Bonaparte had sent a letter to the religious leaders, the sheikhs. But they hid it. Bonaparte, upon hearing this rumor, immediately mounted his horse. He rode straight to the house of Sheikh al-Sadat, which was near the Husseini shrine. That happened in the afternoon. He entered the house suddenly, catching everyone off guard, because no one had been informed that he was coming. He arrived with a large group of horsemen and many soldiers. Sheikh al-Sadat became very annoyed by this unexpected visit. He was a man with a sensitive temperament. Still, he went down to meet Bonaparte, having no idea at all why Bonaparte had come to his house in such a surprising way and at this particular time. When he saw Bonaparte, Bonaparte asked him about the letter. The sheikh replied, "I know nothing about that." In fact, the sheikh really had not heard any news about it. After that, Bonaparte sat in the house for about an hour. Then he mounted his horse again, gathered his soldiers and patrols, and left from the gate of the shrine. At the time, crowds of people had gathered in the mosque and the nearby area. People spoke in confusion and disorder. When they saw Bonaparte and his group inside, they became even more alarmed. Altogether, the people cried out loudly, saying, "Al-Fatiha," referring to the opening chapter of the Quran, often recited in times of distress. Bonaparte turned to look at them and started asking those with him about the reason for the crowd's actions. His men calmed him and told him kindly, "They are praying for you." Bonaparte then went to his own house. This incident was very strange, and the timing of it was astonishing. It was almost as if a major disturbance was about to break out. On that day, the people also began to remove the gates and doors of the nearby streets that did not lead anywhere. They carried all the gates to Birkat al-Azbakiya, near the wooden pier and the main gate. They broke the big gate into two halves, then carried the pieces with porters to that place. Because of this, a large crowd gathered, and the area from the wooden pier almost to the middle of the pond became filled with people. On Saturday, the 11th day of the month, which was the French appointed festival, they fired many cannons in its morning. They also placed a banner, one of their colored flags, on every wooden pole. They beat their drums loudly. Their soldiers, both on horseback and on foot, gathered around the pond. They stood in straight lines according to their known custom. They invited the sheikhs, as well as the important Muslim leaders, the Copts, and the Levantines. All these notable people gathered in the house of Bonaparte's army commander and remained there for most of the day. On that day, people wore their finest clothes. The master merchant, Girgis al-Gohari, dressed in a robe decorated with gold embroidery that ran from his shoulders to his sleeves, and on his chest were sun-like golden designs with buttons. The same applied to another man called Feltius. They all wore Kashmiri turbans. They rode strong, beautiful mules, showing much happiness and joy, more than ever before. Later, the most important of them, the elders, the chief judge, and the head officials, along with Basha Ketkuda, mounted their horses and went to the great mast set up in the middle of the pond, under which many fine carpets had been spread. Then the French soldiers performed exercises in their field. They showed their style of battle. They fired muskets and cannons. When this ended, the soldiers lined up around the great mast. Then the chief among their priests recited upon them. They had a paper written in their language. No one knew its meaning except them. It was as if it was a will, or a piece of advice, or a sermon. Then they stood up, and the gathering dispersed. The Sari Askar, commander of the army, returned to his house, and he set up a lavish feast for those who had attended. When sunset arrived, they lit all the lanterns that were on the mountains, the statues, and the bundles that were on the houses. At dinner time, they set off fireworks, gunpowder, and rockets, and burned flammable substances like oil. They also used things similar to water wheels and wheels made of resin, and many cannons, continuing for about 2 hours at night. The lanterns stayed lit until daybreak. After that, they untied the ropes and removed the hanging things and the statues that had been made. Only the gate remained, which was opposite the Bab al-Hawa, Gate of the Wind, and the big flagpole. Underneath it, there was always a group from their soldiers staying by it day and night, because it was a symbol for them and a sign of the existence of their state, as they believed. On the following night, their high official rode to the district of Giza. He sent some soldiers toward the place where Murad Bey was, and also toward the eastern region. With them, they had cannons mounted on wheels. At the same time, Du Bois, a rank like deputy governor, Qaim Maqam, sent to Madame Nafisa and asked her to bring the wife of Othman Bek, the Tonbaji, cannon operator. Madame Nafisa sent for the religious elders for help. So Sheikh Muhammad al-Mahdi and Sheikh Mahi al-Din al-Kurdi went to her and tried to prevent her from being taken, but they were unable to. So they accompanied her and listened to her story. The reason they wanted her was because they had found a man. He was a servant who was carrying some tobacco and some clothes. They caught him and interrogated him. He confessed that he was following her, and that she had given him those things, and promised him that she would return to him to hand over a tobacco pouch, a sheepskin coat, and 500 pieces of mahbub, a type of silver coin, to deliver those things to his master. This was the reason they were demanding her. They asked, "Where is the servant?" They sent for him to be brought. They asked her about the story, but she completely denied it. So they waited for the servant's arrival until after sunset, but he did not appear. So the elders said to them, "Let her go home, and tomorrow she will come, and we will clarify this issue." But Du Bois said, "No, non," which in their language means no, that is, she should not go. The elders said to him, "Let her go, and we will stay here instead of her." But he still refused. They tried their best to find a solution, but when they lost hope, they left her and went away. She spent the night with them in a part of the house, accompanied by a group of Muslim women and European Frankish women. When the morning came, the elders rode to the Ketkoda Pasha, and the judge rode as well. They went together to the house of the High Commander Sari Asker, who brought her out and handed her to the judge. Nothing at all of this accusation was proven against her. They decided that she must pay a fine of 3,000 French reals, and she moved to a house next to the judge's house, where she stayed so she would be under his protection.
On Sunday they gathered in the Douane. They discussed among themselves different issues. They mentioned the matter of inheritance. Maltaid said, "O sheikhs, tell us what you do when dividing inheritance." So they told him about the Islamic Shar rules related to inheritance shares. He then asked, "Where do you get those rules from?" They replied, "From the Quran," and recited some verses about inheritance to him. The Franks, that is, Europeans, said, "As for us, we do not give inheritance to the son. Instead, we give it to the daughter. We do this and that, depending on what seems logical to us, because the son is more able to earn a living than the daughter." Mikhail Kahil, who was a Syrian and one of the Douane members as well, said, "We Christians and Copts let the Muslims divide our inheritances for us at first. Then we ask the sheikhs to write down how the division is carried out and the evidence for it. The Muslims went along with them, promised to do this, and then the meeting ended. On that day, they dismissed Muhammad Agha al-Musliman, who was the Agha of Mustafazan, a type of special guard. They made him the Katkuda, administrator, for al-Hajj. They put Mustafa Agha Taba, the follower of al-Rahman Agha, who was a former Mustafazan, in his place as Mustafazan. This change was announced publicly. On Monday, they arranged another D1, Administrative Council, for them. They wrote out for them how to divide inheritance, the Islamic rules of the division, the shares for each inheritor, and the Quranic verses about this. The people found this pleasing. On Saturday, the 10th of Jumada al-Awwal, they held the D1 again. They took note of the lists of property and real estate. They divided the properties into upper, middle, and lower categories. The upper properties were 8 in number and belonged to France. The middle properties were 6, and the lowest were 3. Any property that brought in less than a rial per month was considered minor. As for the agents, inns, bathhouses, slaughterhouses, lamp makers, and shops, some of them were assessed at 30, 40, depending on how lowly, busy, or large they were. They made lists about all these. The French began by putting up their notices about their new rules, and they stuck these notices on the walls at street corners and crossroads. They also sent copies of these notices to the city's notables. Next, they appointed engineers together with other people to differentiate between those of high status and those of lower status. They started a process of counting and registration. They went through various neighborhoods to prepare lists and to record the names of the property owners. When news of this spread among the people, there was a lot of confusion, and the people found it very serious. Some of the population gave up and accepted what was happening, submitting to fate. However, a group from the common people separated themselves from the rest and began to consult together in secret. Some of the men wearing turbans, the learned religious men, agreed with their feelings. But these scholars did not think about the consequences, nor did they consider that they themselves were prisoners in the hands of the French. A large number of the rabble, without any chief to lead them or guide them, gathered together. On Sunday they became united, determined to fight, jihad. They brought out weapons and instruments of war and fighting that they had kept hidden. Sayyid Badr and his group took their stand at Husainiya, the Husainiya district, along with some troublemakers from the outer neighborhoods. They made a great noise, shouting and attacking boldly. While shouting, they called out loudly, "May God give victory to the religion of Islam." Then they headed to the house of the Qadi al-Askar, the military judge. They assembled there, and more people like them joined in, their number reaching about 1,000 or more. The judge became afraid of what might happen, so he closed his doors and placed his doorkeepers at the entrances. The mob began throwing stones and bricks at the judge's house, and the judge tried to escape, but he could not get away. A similar situation happened at Al-Azhar, the center of scholars and learning. Meanwhile, at that time, Dubois, or possibly a French commander, marched with a group of his cavalrymen, soldiers, and brave men through Gouria Street. He turned towards the district of Al-Sanadiqiya, the chests market, and then went to the house of the judge. When he saw the large crowd there, he became afraid, so he left through Bani al-Kasrain and Bab al-Zahuma, districts or gates of Cairo. He found the other districts crowded with people. As soon as the mob saw him, they attacked him. They wounded him badly and killed many of his knights, heroes, and brave men. At that point, the Muslims became extremely cautious. They started fleeing in panic, running from every direction. They took control of the city's edges in most of Cairo's districts, such as Bab al-Futu, Bab al-Nasr, and al-Barqiya, extending to Bab Zuwaila, Bab al-Sharia, the direction of Bandukaniyin, possibly the Gunners district, and the areas nearby. However, they did not cross over to the other side. The people destroyed the wooden platforms of the shops, and they used the stones from these platforms to build barricades for fighting. They did this to prevent the enemy from advancing during battle. Behind every barricade, a great number of people gathered to defend it. As for the outer districts and the upper neighborhoods, no one from there rushed out to join the fighting, nor did anyone move quickly to help. The same was true of some people from Old Misr, Old Cairo, and Bulak, and their main excuse was that they were very close to the French military barracks. The groups of fighters remained behind their barricades in the alleys. Then a group of French appeared from the direction of Al-Manakliya and aimed their guns at the Shuwaini barricade. There was a group of fierce fighters from the Maghariba, people from the Maghreb, North Africa, at that barricade. They fought the French until they drove them back and forced them away from Al-Manakliya. And at that time, the situation became worse, and the shaking and the earthquake increased. The common people lost all restraint, and they overreacted, dealing with the issue in the opposite and extreme way. Their hands reached out to looting, snatching, and plundering, so they attacked the Hwania district. They looted the houses of the Christian Levantines and the Greeks, as well as the neighboring homes of the Muslims, completely. They took the deposits and the trusts that had been kept with them. They took women and girls as captives. Likewise, they looted Khan al-Malayat and everything in it, including goods and what was found there. They committed many more shameful things, and they did not consider the consequences. The people spent that night awake, remaining in this state. As for the French, they became fully prepared. They stood ready at the top of the Barqiya and the citadel. They prepared all their weapons, cannons, catapults, and other devices, and kept watch, waiting for orders from their commander. The French commander had previously sent messages to the sheikhs, but the sheikhs had not answered him, nor did they consider any prolonged discussion with him worthwhile. During this, shooting and bombardment continued constantly from both sides, and the crisis doubled in intensity until the time of ASR, the afternoon prayer. Oppression and anxiety increased. At that point, the French directed their cannons and artillery against the houses and neighborhoods, and especially targeted the Al-Azhar Mosque. They aimed their cannons and catapults at it, and likewise at the places nearby where fighters had gathered, such as the Gouria Market and the Coal Merchants' Quarter, Fahamin. When this bombardment came down upon them and the people saw it happening, something they had never witnessed in their lives, they began to cry out, "O Islam, from these pains, O hidden gentle ones," a plea for divine help. Save us from what we fear. They ran away from every market, entered hiding places and cracks in the walls. The bombardment from the citadel and the Barkia continued until the walls shook and the sides of buildings were destroyed as the shells passed through. Some palaces collapsed, shells fell into homes and warehouses, and the terrible sound deafened the ears. When this calamity grew severe and the situation and distress increased, the sheikhs climbed up to the commander of the French, seeking to persuade him to stop his troops from this repeating bombardment, just as Muslims had refrained from fighting them. They said that war is deception and a matter of turns. When they went to him and gathered around him, he reproached them for their delay and accused them of negligence. They apologized to him, and he accepted their excuse. He ordered the bombardment to be lifted from them, and they left his place, calling out for safety along the roads. When people heard about this, their fear subsided. They began to congratulate one another with glad tidings, and their hearts felt safe. This was shortly before sunset. The day ended, and night came. Most people believed that the crisis was now over, but the resistance at the Husainiya and the Braniya quarter, the outer districts, still continued, remaining steadfast in bombardment and fighting. However, those fighters were disappointed in their goal, and their gunpowder ran out. The French overwhelmed them with sustained cannon and gunfire, continuing until about 3 hours into the night. Their weapons and equipment were depleted. They were unable to continue, so they withdrew, and the people left them and turned away. After a part of the night had passed, the French entered the city like a flood. They passed through the alleys and streets without finding any resistance. It was as if they were devils or the soldiers of Iblis, Satan. They destroyed every barricade they found. A group of them entered from the Bab al-Barkia gate. They walked to the district called Al-Ghuria, then turned back and returned, going back and forth and not sleeping. They realized with certainty that there was no one to repel them and no one to prevent them. They began sending messengers, some riding horses, others on foot. Then they entered the Al-Azhar Mosque while riding horses, and between them were foot soldiers like wild beasts. They spread out in its courtyard and its side chambers. They tied their horses to the Qibla wall, the direction Muslims face for prayer. They ran wildly through the corridors and alleys. They broke the lanterns and lamps. They smashed the cupboards of the students, the residents, and the scribes. They plundered everything they found of belongings, vessels, bowls, deposits, and valuables hidden in cabinets and chests. They scattered the books and Qurans on the ground, throwing them there, and trampled on them with their feet and shoes. They defiled the place and relieved themselves inside. Some even urinated, blew their noses and drank wine, breaking the vessels, then throwing them in the courtyard and its corners. Everyone they found there, they grabbed. They even stripped people of their clothes. On Tuesday morning, a group of them lined up at the mosque gate. So everyone who came for prayer would see them, think again, and hurry away. Their groups dispersed through those areas in batches. They made wandering and patrolling those places into a routine. They surrounded the area like a bracelet surrounds a wrist. They looted some of the houses, claiming that they were searching for stolen property, weapons, and hidden soldiers. The residents of that area ran away, desperately seeking to save their lives. The sanctity of that place was violated after it used to be the most honorable part of the city, the place where people desired to live and where they would deposit whatever they feared to lose with its inhabitants. The French almost never entered this area, except rarely, and they used to respect it both openly and in secret. But now, this place lost that special status and its privileged position. Its status fell to a low level. Then they kept roaming the markets and stood in lines, hundreds and thousands. If anyone passed by them, they would search him and take whatever he had, and sometimes they would kill him. They collected the dead and those thrown aside, both French and Muslims. A French group stopped and cleared away the remains of the barricades. They removed the heaps of dirt and stones piled on them, putting them aside to clear the way for passage. The Christian Levantines and also a group of Greeks, whose homes in the inner quarters were looted, banded together to complain to the top French authorities about the disaster that had befallen them. They used the opportunity to take vengeance on the Muslims, showing what they had hidden in their hearts. They beat Muslims in the streets, as if they had joined the French in these calamities. The only reason the Muslims targeted their homes and plundered their possessions was because they were associated with the French, even though the Muslims who lived next to them had also plundered and robbed them. Similarly, the famous Malayat Khan, a trading inn near the gate of Harat al-Rum, the Greek quarter, where Muslim goods and the deposits of the absent were kept, was also looted. The traders there were silent about their loss, accepting God's decree, because if they spoke up, no one would listen to their claim or care for their complaint. Ptolemy assigned a group to patrol at night. They were responsible for watching over anyone who carried a weapon or tried to steal. He spread his helpers in different directions. These helpers went out into the streets to spy on people. They would arrest people based on the reasons they had, and also according to complaints and suggestions from the Christians who told them about whom they hated the most. Ptolemy judged these people as he wanted. He acted based on his personal opinion and effort. He arrested many people. He rode out with his procession, moving through the city. Those arrested were tied up with ropes and brought before him. The helpers dragged them by force, and they were rough and cruel. Then they put these people in prisons. They demanded from them the stolen goods and forced them to return what they had taken. They threatened them with punishment and torture to make them confess. They also questioned them about weapons and tools of war. Some of the arrested people gave information about others, so the authorities went and also arrested those people. This was exactly what the cursed Aga, military commander/officer, did as well. He was harsh in his acts and went beyond limits. Many people were slaughtered, and their bodies were thrown into the Nile River. On those 2 days, and the days that followed, many nations, meaning groups of people, died. Their numbers were so great, no one knows them except Allah. They blamed the non-believers, referring here to the disbelievers, for their rebellion and stubbornness. Some Muslims also suffered at their hands because they were targeted on purpose. When Wednesday came, all the elder scholars rode out together. They went to the house of the French military commander and met with him. They spoke to him politely and pleaded for forgiveness. They requested enough safety for the people and a full pardon. They asked in both languages, hoping to calm the hearts of the citizens and ease their fear from this crisis. The commander promised them, but his promise was not straightforward. He delayed giving a clear answer. He demanded the names and details of the religious figures who had caused unrest among the common people, those who encouraged dispute and rebellion. The scholars avoided giving such names or information. So the commander, speaking through his translator, said, We know about them one by one. They requested him to remove the military from Al-Azhar Mosque. He agreed to this request. He ordered the soldiers to leave at once, but kept 70 of them stationed nearby so they could watch over matters like guards and enforce the rules carefully. After that, the authorities examined those suspected of causing the uprising. They sent for Sheikh Suleiman al-Jawski, the leader of the blind community, Sheikh Ahmad al-Sharqawi, Sheikh Abdul Wahhab al-Sharawi, Sheikh Yusuf al-Musaylihi, and Sheikh Ismail al-Barawi. They imprisoned them in Bayt al-Bakri, the Bakri house. As for Sayyid Badr al-Maqaddam, he disappeared and traveled towards the Levant, al-Sham. The authorities investigated his case, but could not find him. The other scholars tried many times to get these arrested men released. They made efforts, but could not succeed. They also accused Ibrahim Effendi, who was the secretary of Bahar, of gathering a group of ruffians for himself. They said he gave them weapons and whips. He also had several hidden Mamluks and out-of-work soldiers with him. So they arrested him and put him in the Agha's house as a prison. On Sunday, the 8th of the month, the leader of the Sayyids, descendants of the Prophet, along with the other scholars, went to the French military commander's house. They pleaded with him to release the people imprisoned in the Agha's house, as well as those in jail at the citadel. They were told, "Take your time, do not hurry." So they left and went away. At that time, announcements were made in the markets declaring that people were safe. Nobody was to harm anyone else. Yet the arrests of people continued. They would also raid houses for any small suspicion. Some of the goods that had been stolen and taken to the Christians were returned to their owners. During that time, a man called Al-Khalakji interceded on behalf of the Maghribi coal sellers, charcoal sellers from North Africa. He gathered a large group of them and others who were with them and presented them to the military leaders. The leaders chose the young ones and those with the most strength. They gave them weapons and war tools and formed them into an army unit. They put Umar, previously mentioned, as their leader. This group went out with drums from the Levant, according to the customs of the Maghribi soldiers. They traveled to the coastal area because in some regions the local people had risen up against the French army during the time of unrest. These people fought against the French and had also seized some ships that carried a group of French soldiers. So the Maghribi soldiers fought them and killed them. When these Maghribi, North African men arrived, they calmed the unrest and seized the rebellious leaders. The main leader they killed was a man named Ibn Sha'ari. They plundered his house, his goods, his money, and his livestock. He was a man with many possessions. They also took his brothers and children as prisoners and killed them all. They left only his young son alive and made him the new chief in his father's place. The Maghribi soldiers stayed in a house near Bab Saada. The French organized a group of soldiers to come to them every day to train them. They taught them how to fight using the French methods and laws. They explained to them the meaning of their signals during battle formations. During these trainings, the instructor would stand in front of the learners, and they would line up with their rifles in their hands. He would point to them and say words in their language, for example, Mardabouche, and they would respond by striking the butts of their rifles against the ground. Then he would say, "Marsha," and they would march in formation, and so on. At that time, Barthélemy, probably one of the French commanders, traveled to the area of Sariakus. He took with him a large group of soldiers because of the people who had fled to the east. He took some money from the towns and insisted on collecting it before returning after several days. On Wednesday, Sheikh Mohammed al-Mahdi addressed the army about the matter of Ibrahim Effendi, the clerk of the Bahar division. He spoke to him kindly, with the help of Buslik, also known as the Munazim al-Hudud, or the boundary coordinator. In Turkish, he was called Roznamji. They took him from the house of the Agha, commander, to his own house. They asked him for a list or a record concerning the properties in the Bahar office. On Thursday, several ships, around 40 in number, left, carrying French soldiers towards the coastal northern area. On the night of Saturday, the 24th, letters arrived from the Levant side. They were in the form of a decree, firman, with a decorative heading, and written from Ahmad Pasha al-Jazar, and another from Bakr Pasha, addressed to Mustafa Bek Katkhuda. There was also a letter from Ibrahim Bek, addressed to the sheikhs. All these letters were in Arabic. Their content, after eloquent introductions, verses from the Quran, hadiths, and traditions about jihad, included curses against the Franks, the French, condemnation of them, and accusations about their corrupt beliefs, their lies, and their trickery. The rest of the letters had similar meanings. Mustafa Bek Katkhuda took these letters and brought them to the military leaders. When he looked at it, he said, "This is a forgery made by Ibrahim Bey to cause enmity and discord between us and you. As for Ahmad Pasha, he is a simple man. He was never a governor of Syria or Egypt. The governor of Syria is Ibrahim Pasha. As for the governor of Egypt, he is Abdullah Pasha, son of the Grand Vizier, who is now the governor of Syria. I know this for certain, and after some days a governor will come, and he will stay with him, just as the Mamluks used to stay with the governors." News also arrived about the removal of Muhammad Pasha Azat from his office, and that several other state officials were also dismissed. During these days, the regular meetings of the council, Diwan, stopped. Instead, everyone focused their efforts on strengthening the defenses of the different regions and areas. They built constructions on the hills that surround the city. They placed artillery and cannons there. They destroyed several places in the Giza area and fortified it more strongly, as well as old Cairo, Misr al-Atika, and the neighborhoods of Shubra. They demolished several mosques, including those next to the Battle of Imbaba bridge and the Max Mosque, now known as the Aulad Anan Mosque, on the canal near Bab al-Bar. They also cut down many palm trees and other trees to use for building forts and barricades. They destroyed the Kazruni Mosque in Al-Rauda and cut down the trees in Giza near Abu Huraira. They dug many ditches there and elsewhere. They also removed palm trees from the Hina area and Bulak. They damaged and ruined many houses, breaking their windows and doors. They took the wood from these houses because they needed it for building works, for fuel, and for other uses. On Sunday night, a group of French soldiers entered the Bait al-Bakri house around midnight. They asked for the sheikhs who were imprisoned with the army commander so they could talk with them. When these men came out of the house, they found a large group waiting for them. The soldiers arrested them and took them to the house of the Qaimakam, military commander, in Darb al-Jamamiz. This was the place where the previous Qaimakam had been killed and where his replacement now lived. When they arrived there, the soldiers stripped the prisoners of their clothes. Then they took them up to the citadel and put them in prison until morning. In the morning, the soldiers took them out and executed them with rifles, then threw their bodies from the wall behind the citadel. The fate of these men was unknown to most people for several days. On that same day, some of the religious sheikhs went to Mustafa Bey, the Kethuda of the Pasha. They spoke to him, asking him to go with them to the army commander and to intercede for the imprisoned group, thinking that perhaps they were still alive. Mustafa Bey went with them to the commander, but the interpreter told them, "Be patient, this is not the right time," and left them to deal with other business. The group also left and returned to their homes. On Tuesday, a group of French soldiers marched to the Al-Azhar neighborhood. People became afraid of them, fearing something bad would happen. That day, a disturbance broke out among them, so they closed their shops and hurried to escape, each to his house or to the mosques, while opinions differed about what was happening. People believed different things according to their own guesses and assumptions, and because of the confusion in their minds. Some of the sheikhs went to the army commander to inform him of what happened, and people became worried. He sent to them and ordered them to go, so they went. Then people withdrew, and they opened the shops. The Aga, Ottoman military commander, and the Wali, governor, and Bartholomew, these people went around calling for security and reassurance, and the situation calmed down. It was said that some of their prominent men stayed near the calm guardhouse at the shrine. One of them sat there with his followers, and they stood waiting for him. Maybe this was done on purpose in order to frighten people and make them afraid, fearing that there could be a rebellion because of what had been spread about the killing of the previously mentioned elders. This is the most likely reason. At that time, they wrote papers and posted them in the markets. These papers included forgiveness and warnings not to incite trouble or cause disturbances. They said that anyone who killed a Muslim would be treated the same as one who killed a Frenchman. Also, at that time, they started making lists of properties and collecting what was due. No one objected to this, and no one said a word. Whoever did not agree to the arrangements stayed silent and only grumbled quietly. At this time, they also closed the gates of the small alleys and the narrow streets that did not lead anywhere. These are the gates that had been left open and whose owners had been allowed to keep them open. Before the incident, Bartholomew had negotiated about them and made deals regarding their status, as well as about the gates in the Husainiya area. They also negotiated with the intermediaries about letting the gates remain. But when this incident was over, they reopened these gates. They took off the gates and moved them to the area of Al-Azhar, where they collected gates. Then they broke all of them and took the wood apart. They put some of the wood on carts to be used in their activities in other districts and places. They sold some of the gates as firewood and also sold any iron or other materials in them. On the night of Thursday, the Egyptians attacked the gate of the Toulon market. They broke it and entered the market from there. They broke the lanterns and opened 3 shops. They took what merchants from the Maghreb, North Africa, had left inside. They killed the guard who was there. Then they left without being stopped or confronted by anyone. On the mentioned Thursday, the elders went to the gate at the soldiers' quarters to intercede for Ibn al-Juski, the head of the blind, whose father had been killed. He had been detained at the house of al-Bakri. The elders' mediation succeeded, and he was released. The month of Jumada al-Thani began on Saturday. The year 1213 Hijri corresponds to late 1798 CE. At this time, they wrote several notices in the name of the elders. They sent them to the provincial towns, and also posted copies in the markets and streets. The text of the notice was as follows: "A piece of advice from all the scholars of Islam in protected Egypt. We seek refuge in God from conflict, both its visible and its hidden forms. We declare to God our innocence from those who cause corruption on the earth. We know the people of protected Egypt, especially from the side of the Ja'idiyah, and the wicked people who stirred up evil between the common people and the French soldiers. These soldiers were our friends and beloved ones in peace. As a result of what happened, there was the killing of many. Some Muslims had their houses looted. However, by the hidden mercy of God, the trouble calmed down. This happened because of our intercession with the commander of the armies, Bonaparte. This calamity was lifted. Bonaparte is a man of complete intelligence. He has mercy and compassion for the Muslims and love for the poor and needy. Without him, the soldiers would have burned down the whole city, looted all the wealth, and killed all the people of Egypt. So, you must not cause trouble. Do not obey the orders of those who corrupt. Do not listen to the words of hypocrites. Do not follow evil people. Do not be among the losers. those foolish people who do not care about the consequences. You should do this to protect your homeland and assure the safety of your families and your religions. Truly, God, glorified and exalted is He, gives the kingdom to whomever He wishes and rules as He wants. We inform you, everyone who caused this trouble was killed, one after the other. God relieved the land and the people from them. Our advice to you: do not throw yourselves into destruction. Busy yourselves with what benefits your livelihoods and the matters of your religion. Pay the tax that is required from you, for the religion is advice and peace. There was also an order for the rest of the residents to gather in the area of Birkat al-Azbakiyah and the areas around it. They had to leave their houses and live there as one community. This was because of the number of Muslims entering the area. Even, for example, people were so afraid that no one would walk outside without carrying a weapon after the events began. Before that, when the French entered the city, people did not walk at all outside except for necessities. Whoever had no weapon would carry a stick, a whip, or something similar in his hand. The hearts of the residents became hostile towards the Muslims, and they became cautious of them. The Muslims also stopped going out or passing through the markets from sunset until sunrise. Among those who moved from al-Darb al-Ahmar to al-Azbakiyah was a Christian called Abu Khashaba. He would walk alone without any sense, climbing and going downstairs faster than a healthy person. He would ride a horse, trot with it in this condition, and they had great care and special attention for him. He used to live in the house of Mustafa Kashif Tara. During the incident, an attack happened on the public house and it was looted. Some of the French inside were killed, and the rest escaped. The people in the citadel, Al-Qala, were informed, so a large group descended from it. Some of them stood outside the house after they pushed away the crowd at its door. They shot at them with guns, and those who entered then killed every Muslim they found inside. There were many Muslims inside. This house also contained many strange machines for crafts and rare instruments, as well as astronomical devices and engineering tools, and sciences of mathematics, and other things unknown in that time. Each machine was beyond value, only. When the French entered Alexandria, they found that the common people did not know the purpose or the benefit of the machines or equipment the French had brought. The people destroyed all those machines, broke them, and cut them to pieces. This was a great hardship for the French. For a long time, they kept searching for those machines. They offered large rewards to anyone who would bring a machine back to them. Among the people who were killed during the events at that house was Sheikh Muhammad al-Zahar. On the 5th day, they released Ibrahim Effendi, the official scribe of the port, and he returned to his home. On the 8th day, they killed 4 of the Copts. 2 of them were carpenters. It was said that these men had become drunk in the tavern. In their drunkenness, they wandered about and opened up several shops, stealing things from them. They had done such things several times before, so the Copts became very angry with them. During these days they wrote many papers and sent copies of them to the different provinces. They also pasted some of these copies on the walls of the neighborhoods and markets. The papers were made in the names of the religious leaders, the sheikhs too, but the wording of these was even stronger than the first ones. The text of one paper went like this: "Advice from the scholars of Islam in protected Egypt. We inform you, O people of the cities and the regions, you believers, and you inhabitants of the countryside from among the Arabs and the peasants, that Ibrahim Bey, Murad Bey, and the rest of the Mamluk state have sent many letters and correspondences to all the Egyptian regions. The purpose was to stir up trouble and discord among the people. They claimed falsely that these letters came from our master, the Sultan, and some of his ministers, but this is nothing but lies and falsehood. Because of this, those people, the Mamluks and their supporters, experienced great grief and intense distress. They became very angry with Egypt's scholars and its people because they refused to join them in rebellion or leave their families and homelands. The Mamluks wanted to cause trouble and evil between the people and the French soldiers. They wanted to destroy the country and bring ruin to all its people. This was because of their tremendous grief over losing their power and being deprived of the protected kingdom of Egypt. If the letters they were sending were truly from the Sultan, they would have sent them openly with trusted men. We inform you as well that the French, as a people, are different from the other European groups. The French always love the Muslims and their religion. They dislike the idolaters. The nature of the French is that they are friends of our master, the Sultan. They serve his dynasty, are close companions of his friends, and are always loyal to him, to his household, to living among Muslims, and to helping them. They love those who are loyal to him, and dislike those who are his enemies. Because of this, there is extreme and deep enmity between the French and the Russians, the Muscovites, because of the ugly and evil hostility that the Russians have for the Muslims. The French cooperate with the Sultan to take back his countries, God willing. They will not leave any part of those enemy people remaining. So, we advise you, O regions of Egypt, that you should not stir up conflicts, nor bring about evils, O residents of the city, nor oppose the French armies in any way that may cause you harm. That will only bring you ruin and destruction. Do not listen to the words of those who spread corruption, and do not obey the orders of the reckless, who cause corruption in the land, but do not seek to improve it. If you do so, you will become regretful for what you have done. All you are required to do is to pay the required taxes to your responsible officials. Then you may live peacefully in your homes, with your wealth and your families, safe and secure. This is because a royal order has come from the commander of the Grand Army, the chief of the armed forces, Bonaparte. He made an agreement with us that he will not dispute with anyone regarding the religion of Islam, nor will he oppose us in the laws that God established, nor will he interfere with what is decreed by God. He will remove all types of oppression from the subjects, collect only the set tribute, and abolish the extra burdens that oppressive rulers have added. So, do not put your hopes in Ibrahim and Murad. Instead, turn back to your wealth, your property, and to the owner of the universe, the creator of all people. The prophet and his noble messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Civil strife is dormant, cursed is the one who awakens it among the nations. May the best of prayers and peace be upon him." In the 13th day of the month, 2 people were killed near Bab Zuela. One of them was a Jew, but the reason for their murder was not established. On that day, they entered the house of Nasib Ibrahim, as if searching for something, and they took out chests containing gold jewelry, jewels, utensils made of gold and silver, possessions, and many clothes. On the 15th day, a group of French soldiers came to Bab Zuela and opened some shops in the sugar market. They took sugar from them, and it was lost to its owners. On that same day, someone was pointed out who had 2 boxes in safekeeping for Ayub Bey, the Dawadar, secretary. They summoned him and ordered him to bring the 2 boxes. He initially denied knowing about them and refused several times, but in the end he brought them. Inside, they found weapons, jewels, strings of pearls, and gem-encrusted daggers, as well as other items. On the 20th day, they wrote and printed several pages and pasted them in the markets. Their contents were, "On Friday, the 21st day of the month, we intended to release a device into the air at the Ezbekia Pond using a French invention." This caused a lot of noise among the people, as was their habit. When that day arrived, before the Asr prayer, people gathered, along with many Europeans, to witness this marvel. I was among them. I saw a piece of fabric shaped like a bowl, raised on an upright pole. Its colors were red, white, and blue, like the shape of a sieve. In its center was a lamp with a wick soaked in some oils. This lamp was affixed to iron wires from itself to the rim of the circle. These wires were tied with pulleys and ropes, and the ends of the ropes were in the hands of people standing on the roofs of nearby houses. Regarding that fabric, it filled with air and swelled up until it became like a ball. The smoke inside it tried to rise to its center, but could not find an opening. So the smoke pulled the fabric with it upwards. They, the people operating it, helped lift it up using those ropes until it rose above the ground. Then they cut those ropes, and the fabric ascended into the sky, carried by the air. It moved gently for a little while, then it suddenly fell when its string snapped. The fabric itself also fell, and many sheets of printed papers scattered from it. When this happened, people were disappointed because they had expected something bigger from its fall. What had been said, that it was shaped like a craft or ship that travels through the air by clever means, with people able to sit inside it and travel to distant lands to gather news and send letters, did not turn out to be true. Instead, it appeared to be just like the kites that children make for holidays and parties. That night, a group of French people went around the markets carrying baskets filled with poisoned meat. They fed this meat to the dogs, and a large number of dogs died as a result. When morning came, people found many dead dogs lying scattered in the markets. The people then hired someone to remove the carcasses and take them away to the outskirts of the city. The reason for this, the poisoning of the dogs, was that as the French were patrolling the markets at night, they tried to be quiet, but the dogs would bark at them and chase after them. So they did this, poisoned the dogs, to get rid of them and relieve themselves and the people of this problem. On the 25th of the month, a detachment of soldiers traveled towards Murad Bey's location, as well as towards Kardassa, because of the presence of Arab tribes there. Other groups also went to Suez and Salahiyah. They took the camels belonging to the water carriers and their donkeys, but they compensated the owners by giving them their payment. Because of the shortage and high price of water, the price of a water skin reached 10 half-pieces of silver. Within this period, they, the French, discovered many stores and hiding places scattered around in different places. These contained boxes, goods, weapons, porcelain vessels, and copper utensils, as well as other things. This month came to an end, along with the many events that occurred, both major and minor, which were too numerous to count in detail. Among those events was that they, the French, built in the Nubian gardens next to Azbakiyya certain buildings with a special design, separated for men and women to gather for entertainment and indecent activities at specific times. They required anyone wishing to enter to pay a special fee or to have a permit in hand. They also demolished and rebuilt places in the area of the Mikyas, Nilometer, and Al-Rauda Island, and they destroyed some buildings in Giza. They leveled the mound next to the Lemon Bridge and built on top of it a marvelous windmill, which was powered by the wind and used for grinding wheat. This mill had 4 stones, and another windmill was constructed in Rhoda, facing the archery training grounds. They also demolished the mosque next to the Dika Bridge. They began to fill in the low areas around the Azbakiyya Pond. They demolished the places opposite Baitsari, which was used as a military headquarters, to create a wide open area. They further destroyed the houses facing those locations on the other side, as well as the gardens. After that, they removed all the trees and filled in the places with carefully leveled soil along a straight line, extending from the limit of Baitsari Askari to the bridge of Al-Maghribi. They restored the mentioned bridge, which had fallen into disrepair and was almost collapsing. They did the same process after that. arranging and organizing so that it became a great extended and level causeway, straight from Azbakiya to Bulak. Near Bulak, it divides into two branches. One branch goes towards the road of Abi al-Ala, and the other branch goes towards the direction of Al-Tabaneh and the bank of the Nile. Along its path, it meets the used road coming from the road of Abi al-Ala and the Jami al-Khatri to the area of the tanneries. They dug moats, kandaks, on both sides of this causeway, from the beginning to the end. They also planted trees and willows, sycamores, along its sides. They made another road between Bab al-Hadid and Bab al-Adawi at the place known as Sheikh Sha'ib, where the pottery workshop is located. They filled and leveled a long causeway there as well, starting from the mentioned limit and ending at the direction of the slaughterhouse, outside Al-Husayniya. They removed anything in between, such as buildings, sheds, trees, and small hills. They cut large parts from the big hill next to the Kantara al-Hajib, gatekeeper's bridge, and in their path they filled part of the canal of Birkat al-Ratli. They also cut down the trees of the garden of Khatib al-Bahar, the scribe of the sea, which faces the causeway of Birkat al-Ratli, and also the trees of the causeway itself. They demolished the buildings between Bab al-Hadid and the spacious square behind Jami al-Maqs. They continued along the low ground, so that a continuous road was formed from Azbakiya to the direction of Kubat al-Nisr, also known as Kubat al-Izab, towards the Adiliya side, along a straight line in both directions. They appointed people among themselves to maintain and look after these roads. These people repaired anything that was damaged due to heavy trampling and from the hooves of horses, mules, and donkeys. They accomplished this great and important work in the shortest period of time. They did not force anyone to do the work. Instead, they paid the workers more than their usual wage, and even dismissed them after the midday break. For speed and ease of work, they used newly invented tools that were easy to handle and helped in the task, and which were also inexpensive. For example, instead of using baskets and troughs, they used small carts with two handles sticking out behind. The worker would fill the cart from the front with soil, clay, or stones with more capacity than 5 normal baskets. Then he would grip the two handles with his hands, push the cart forward on its wheels with minimal effort to the place of work, tip it with one hand, and unload what was inside quickly, with no effort or hardship. They also had hoes and axes, well made and crafted precisely. Most of the craftsmen working were from their own group, and they did not cut stones or wood except with geometric methods, using right angles and straight lines. They made the mosque of Al-Zahir Baibars, which is outside of the Husayniya citadel, and its minaret, into a tower. They placed cannons on its walls, and they made a group of soldiers stay in it. Inside, they built several dwellings for the soldiers who were stationed there. This mosque had been inactive, and rituals had not been performed in it for a long time. They removed many of its stones and columns intentionally. Also, they built on the hill known as Tel al-Aqarib, the Scorpion's Hill, in the Nasiriyah area, new buildings, cranes, and towers. They put in these buildings many war machines and stationed soldiers there to guard. They demolished several houses there, which belonged to the nobles, and took their rubble and marble to use for their own buildings. They set aside for the engineers, astronomers, scholars, and experts in mathematical sciences like geometry, astronomy, engravings, designs, painters, writers, accountants, and builders, the Nasiriyah quarter where the new road is. In that neighborhood there were houses like the house of Qasim Bey, the house of Amir al-Hajj, known as Abu Yusuf, and the house of Hassan Kashif Jarkas, both the old and new buildings that he himself had founded, built, and decorated, and spent a huge amount of money on from unjust taxes collected from the people. At the time when all this construction and decoration was about to be finished, this incident occurred, so the residents fled, leaving them behind. There they, the French, collected a large number of their books. They appointed keepers and supervisors to protect and organize these books for the students. Whoever wanted to study or look something up, they would go and find what they wanted there. Every day, before noon by 2 hours, the students among them would meet and sit in the open hall across from the bookstores, on chairs lined up in a row opposite a long, wide desk. Anyone who wished to review a book would request it, and the keeper would bring it for them. They would then read, review, and write until soldiers sent them away from below. If some Muslims came to them wanting to visit and observe, they would not prevent them from entering even their most valuable places. They would welcome them with smiles, laughter, and would show happiness at their coming, especially if they saw that the visitor had the ability, knowledge, or desire to learn. In that case, they would offer even more friendliness and affection. They would show these visitors all kinds of books, printed with all types of images, such as spherical maps of countries, regions, animals, birds, plants, chronicles of the ancients, secrets of nations, stories of the prophets with their pictures, signs, and miracles, and the history of their nations with events that stimulate the mind. I myself went to them several times, and they showed me these things. Among what I saw was a large book about the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, including a portrait of him drawn as best as their knowledge and efforts allowed. In the image, he was standing on his feet, looking perfectly dignified at the sky, in a way that inspired awe. In his right hand, he was holding a sword, and in his left was a book, and his companions, may God be pleased with them, were around him with swords in their hands. On another page was a picture of the rightly guided caliphs, and on another a picture of the Miraj, the Ascension, and Al-Barak, with the Prophet, peace be upon him, riding on it over the rock of Jerusalem, and the image, drawing or depiction, of Jerusalem, as well as the sacred mosque in Mecca and the Prophet's mosque in Medina. There are also images of the great religious leaders, the mujtahids, those scholars who can give independent legal rulings, and the rest of the caliphs and the sultans. They also have representations of Istanbul and the great mosques found there, such as the Hagia Sophia Mosque and the Sultan Suleiman Mosque. They even show what the prayer on Friday looks like in those mosques. There is also a depiction of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, the companion of the Prophet buried in Istanbul, and how the funeral prayer is performed in that mosque. Depictions of lands, cities, and natural features. There are also pictures of countries, coastlines, seas, the pyramids, and the pharaoh's temples, Barabi al-Sad, in Upper Egypt. They depict shapes and forms, and the various types of pens and calligraphy styles used for writing. Each country is shown with the animals, birds, plants, and herbs particular to it. They include the sciences of medicine, anatomy, geometry, and methods of lifting heavy weights. Many Islamic books have been translated into their language. I saw among them the book Al-Shifa by the scholar Qadi Iyad. They call it Shifa-i-Sharif. I also saw the Burda poem by al-Busiri among them. Many people have memorized several verses of it and have translated them into their language. I also saw that some among them have memorized chapters from the Quran. They have a great passion for learning, and most of their interest is in mathematics, knowledge of languages, and striving very hard to master languages and logic. They devote themselves to these fields day and night. They own separate books for every type of language, explaining their variations and derivations, making it easy for them to translate whatever they wish from any language into their own in the shortest possible time. At the place of Tut, an astronomer, and his students, I saw special rooms dedicated to them. Inside were strange and expertly made astronomical instruments. There were amazing devices for measuring heights, altitude instruments, well-made, expensive, and crafted from gilded brass. Every device is composed of numerous parts, all precisely fitted together with clever connections and joints. If these instruments are assembled, they become large devices that take up a lot of space, with their sights, lenses, or viewfinders, and small apertures allowing observation of heavenly bodies. But if disassembled, their pieces can be placed in a small container. They also have eyepieces for observing stars and monitoring their movements to know their positions, bodies, heights, conjunctions, celestial events, and oppositions, planetary positions. There are also all kinds of armillary spheres and clocks that count the seconds and minutes in a Western style. These are costly to make and have unique designs. Some groups among them have devoted themselves to the art of drawing, such as Ibrahim Katkuda al-Sanari, and they are the illustrators of every gathering. Among them is someone called Ariju, the painter, Musawir, who draws the images of people so skillfully that anyone viewing them thinks they are solid figures, almost as if they are about to speak. He even painted pictures of each of the elders separately in its own circle. Likewise, he painted other notable people. They hung these paintings in some of the rooms of Sari Askar, a military leader. In another place, there is someone who paints pictures of animals and insects. In another, someone paints fish and whales, showing all their types and names. If they come across a strange animal or an unusual whale that does not exist in their land, they placed the body itself in a specially prepared liquid. This liquid was designed to preserve the body so that it would remain in the same condition and appearance without changing or decaying, even if it stayed there for a long time. They also set aside special places for the engineers and craftsmen who work with fine instruments. The wise man, Roiba, lived in a house with many rooms near this place. He put his machines, powders, and tools in one area. He installed furnaces and vessels for distilling water and oils, as well as extracting salts. He also had large cauldrons and barrels. They made a place for him that had both lower and upper sections. Both sections had shelves. On these shelves were pots filled with compounds, mixtures, and various glass flasks. There were also several doctors and surgeons present. They set aside a place in the house of Hassan Kashif Juarkas for making wisdom and practicing chemical medicine. In this place, they built skillfully manufactured furnaces and amazing distillation devices. They created machines for raising spirits and for distilling water, as well as devices for extracting plant essences and ashes from herbs and plants. They also extracted clear and pure waters. Around the inside of the place, there were crystal glass bottles of different shapes and forms on shelves and on curtain hangers. Inside them were various kinds of extracts. One of the strangest things I saw in that place was when one of the experienced people took a glass flask that contained some extracted water. He poured a little from it into a cup. Then he poured something else on it from another glass flask. Immediately, smoke of various colors came out and rose until it stopped, and everything in the cup dried up. What was left became a yellow stone. He turned it over with tongs, and it had turned into a dry stone. We took it in our hands and looked at it. Then he did the same with another type of water, and it turned into a blue stone. Then he used a third water, and it became a reddish, strong stone. He took a very small amount of white dust, put it on an anvil, and gently struck it with a hammer. A great sound came from it like the sound of a bell. We were startled, but they laughed at our reaction. He took an empty, long glass flask, about the size of a small bottle with a narrow mouth. He dipped it into clean water placed inside a wooden box lined with lead on the inside. He put another flask on top of it in a special way. He lowered them into the water and lifted them so that air got trapped inside one of them. Then another person came with a burning wick, took the mouth of the flask out of the water, brought the flame close to it, and immediately the trapped air came out with a loud noise. Other things like this happened, as well as wise experiments produced by combining materials and mixing properties. There was, for example, the spinning wheel used to rotate glass. The motion of the wheel produced an electric effect, with small streaks appearing when it touched even a light piece of thick fabric nearby. It also made a crackling sound. If someone touched the thread connected to the spinning wheel and another person touched the rotating glass, or even just came near it with their hand, their body would shake and shiver. His body and the cracking of the bones of his shoulders and his arms would happen immediately in a clear manner. Anyone who touched him, even if it was just the touch of his clothes or anything that was connected to him, would experience the same thing, even if they were 1,000 people or more. They had, about him, strange matters, conditions, and compositions that resulted in things that minds like ours cannot comprehend. They also set aside special places for carpenters and makers of machines and woodworkers, as well as for windmills, carts, and the necessities for these people in their jobs, in their engineering, and for the masters of their crafts. And there was another place for the blacksmiths. In it there were very big forges, and on them were large bellows that would send out air with great force, so that the bellows would pull in air from above with a gentle motion. They made great anvils and huge hammers for making machine parts from iron and for turning on lathes. They set up large lathes for turning big iron screws. They also had heavy wheels turned by men for the master turner, who worked on iron with hard tools. There was a small pot with a hole hanging above, and inside it was water which would drip onto the turning place to cool the heat caused by friction. In these upper places they made delicate things like gears and the machineries of clocks and precise engineering devices and other things.